Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I have an interview for you between myself and Nikkiana Jones. She has a great channel. She's interviewed a lot of interesting people, as well as some of my friends and colleagues. So I would highly encourage you all to go check her out and maybe extend some of that love that you gave to me from Jimmy over to her. I think she's going to be a great platform in the future for a lot of interesting conversations with a lot of interesting minds. So all the links will be in the description. She's also got a Twitter account. She's very active on there as well. So without further ado, let's get into the interview.
Hi, you guys. I'm here with Andrew Fink. He is the host of Ancient History Criticisms, AHC. It's a YouTube channel. He's done such amazing work. You have to go see his stuff. He is the I don't know, dude. I think you're the most progressive in terms of all the hallmarks and finding all of them. And well, okay, yeah, a lot of people are, but I go watch his channel. It's amazing. So hey,
Hey.
Paraphrase for people. Explain it to me like I'm a five. Okay, so you have we've done a video before. People can go watch that. We did it with
Yes.
Phil as well. That's a good video. But like, let's just go ahead and paraphrase. Okay, you're big into nubs, you're big into pinch holes, you're big into beveled blocks. So give us some of the top five, whatever hallmarks, and then what that means and where they're found.
Okay. Well, I think we're gonna have to start with the nubs, and I really wasn't expecting to become the nub guy. It's kind of a weird like niche that I found myself in because when we started out, it was like Baalbek and those beveled blocks, the blocks with the little recessed edge around them, and they look
Okay,
kind of like fake bricks.
if I share screen, can you pull up would it be fast for you to do like one or two
Oh, I
examples
could
for
pull up the
people?
whole catalog.
Show people what a beveled block is, and then where it would be,
Okay.
and then we'll do a nubs, like give them like 5 or 6 examples of a nubs, 5 or 6 examples of a pinch hole,
Cool.
and then we're gonna go deeper than that because this has been done to death, or not to
Yeah.
death, but
I mean, yeah,
it's
we've
been
gone
done.
over, it's been retread over and over, and we haven't really gone through like, what does this mean overarchingly?
That's what I want to go into today. Like, okay, so we got all this evidence that there was some shit going on. What do you make of it then? So like so if you have just come to this for the first time ever, we're gonna give you a little crash course for a couple of minutes, and then we're gonna get deeper than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you like, I'll go ahead and we'll share screen,
Okay.
and you guys should be able to see my screen. So we'll go to the trust, and I call it the AHC trust because I'm trusting everybody to use these photos in an academic way, right? So we're finding all these photos online. They belong to other people, but they're on Google. They come up on Google. So if we can find them, we're going to take them. Even if we have to screenshot them, we're going to try to take these photos.
Yeah.
But we're not going to use them, to make money because that will get us in all kind of trouble with copyrights and all this stuff. So as long as you adhere to fair use and you say this is for research purposes only, we're okay. So if you guys want to have access to this catalog of photos, just let me know on Twitter and we'll get you added. But just understand that it's for research purposes only. And if you start trying to make money off this, we're going to have to take away your access because we don't want to get any trouble with copyrights. So,
Cool.
um,
Very
like you said,
thing there. Okay.
it's one of those things. It's like we put in so much work into this, and it's not just my work. It's a lot of other people's hours of looking at photos. So we've got a lot of research time tied up in this. So it would be terrible to like have it taken down off the internet. We've already had that happen a few years ago. The Google Plus service used to do what the Microsoft OneDrive system does, which is just host your photos. And it was a really cool system. You had like a little messenger system built in and all this. But then, they just decided to stop offering the service, and we lost that whole, catalog, and we had to start over. So we're kind of protective about it right now. So we'll start, like you said, we can go to Baalbek because that is where it all started for me.
Okay, that's
So
in Lebanon, y'all.
we'll go to and my catalog is organized by country, and after a while, you get really good at remembering and recalling where things are, where you saw something. It's like that
You're a
game,
connoisseur.
yeah, it's like that game, Guess Who, where you got the guy on the other side, and pick match the two guys together and all this. So it's like you get really good at that recall ability if you do this enough. So for me, it started with Baalbek, and from Graham Hancock and Brian Forrester. And in my first video, it was like, all right, prerequisites for my channel is you need to go watch all of Brian Forrester's videos. You need to read all of Graham Hancock's books. Get this kind of groundwork in what the collective community is talking about right now. And then I'd like to take it to the next level. So like you said, there was a lot of people retreading the same information, and maybe they were missing out on some details at some of these sites that were going over and over. And we're like, but guys, everyone seems to be missing this detail. And it's like, so basically what happened was we just decided, we're going to be the guy that tries to fill the void and point out the things that don't get pointed out, the things that fall through the cracks, essentially. Right. So now everybody knows on the corner of the Trilithon wall. So you have the Trilithon blocks, but then there are also these other huge blocks, right? Especially this one on the corner. It's a huge block. And above it,
and that's one single block, y'all.
Yes. And you'll see these, the style changes. Then you have these blocks with these little recessed edges around them. And we call these bevel blocks. It's kind of like a stone brick or something. It's kind of like, looks like there should be grout there.
Is that a pinch hole? It looks like there's two pinch holes right there.
I see that. And the more you look at these photos, you're going to start seeing other things like, oh, there's a hole. Is that hole for something? Yep. And you get to, these hallmarks we're talking about right now, you get to be a connoisseur of them, right? You get to be able to recognize from your past experiences looking at them at one site, that at another site that matches. And that's kind of how it all started for me and a few other guys. It's like, we noticed, hey, these blocks are kind of, they're neat. They have like a little bit of an advanced characteristic to them, right? They're stacked very well. They're very like professionally finished, and they were kind of we always thought it was a secondary culture coming in, or even maybe like a tertiary
stylistic thing, right?
Yeah, this is the hallmarks of another culture coming in and putting their stylistic imprint on the site. And that could be, but it could also be that it was just a style change of these original megalithic builders, because we have these blocks at other megalithic sites and they get big and weird, just like the Trilithon stones. So like I said, here we're at Baalbek, and me and Ancient Alternative View Phil started hunting around, the Middle East areas, looking for more of these kind of sites, and we found a ton. And so far, we found enough to where I can do, I think, like 16 episodes on these blocks, where I try to go through like 4 or 5 sites a video and show you all these kind of blocks, and just kind of give you all that hallmark recognition knowledge.
Where's some other, like, is there bevel blocks in Peru?
I'll show you one of the biggest ones that we found, right? So we were still looking in the area, this this Middle Eastern area, and the Fertile Crescent, the Mediterranean, and we found Nimrod's fortress. And Nimrod's fortress, which is like in the Golan Heights, like the disputed areas around Palestine and Israel, right? We found these same blocks again. So they're way bigger now. Like a person can like duck down and go through this opening. These are ginormous blocks, right? And really weird joinery and like a keystone of some kind put above the doorway. Very odd, right? So we were like, okay, so what does this mean? If we see these kind of blocks, does this mean these were the same people that built Baalbek? And that's where the snowball starts to roll. You start to realize, okay, well, they say it was built by the Romans, but then there's all these other sites with these kind of blocks that Baalbek has, but they don't say those were built by Romans. So who's lying? Or who was involved in the construction of both cultures, right? Because they both had the same technique. So these are just a few of them at the site, but the bigger ones, the biggest ones, look at this. Look at these things. Wow. They don't fit anything else in the wall, right? They're just like, what? Like the other blocks compared to these, like what were you even contemplating doing with these blocks? Like this is almost just like showing off. Like, yeah, we're going to put this little part of the wall, we're going to make it ridiculous just to show you how powerful we are.
I wonder if the littler blocks were made later. Like
They could have been, right? Like this could be like a ruined stump, and the primitive or Bronze Age people or whoever came in, saw this primitive or this destroyed stump, and decided, well, it could have been maybe it was a fortress originally, right? And maybe they picked up on the fact that, hey, this is a good defensive location, and let's just rebuild it. It'll be our fort now. I mean, what's the story of the Crusades about? Groups of men taking over forts back and forth. This is my castle now.
yeah.
And
All,
that is
all
a
the
great
time.
and that's a great segue, because a lot of these bevel block structures are crusader forts. So, what is that about? If they have bevel block
What,
foundations,
like in Italy or something, or where? Okay.
yeah, as a matter of fact, let me see if I can find one here. If I can move our window, I believe, let's search Adaret Fortress. But yes, so here we are, a crusader fortress, right? But all that's left of it, I'll give you an overview real quick. It's like a maybe a star fort, or at least hexagonal, some kind of octagonal citadel maybe on top of this hill. But you look at the blocks that it has. Now look, just like Nimrod's fortress, the exact same block style again, and it's the same execution. It's not like it doesn't. To me, it doesn't look like one group is copying another group. It looks like the exact same execution. Like
Right.
like the guys who
Same
just
kind of
left
people.
Baalbek and came over here and did this. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like who?
Okay, so we're in the middle, like Lebanon and
Mhm.
and Jordan. They're not so far apart. So like where, like how far reaching does this go?
It goes pretty far. So we found them kind of like stylistically a little bit different in Egypt. They're not as like, they don't protrude as much as this. They're a little bit more subtle. We found them in Peru even. We're not even sure what to make of that connection, which I'll show you. Vilka Schumann has one of these situations where you have the megalithic polygonal stuff, then you have the rubble fill Inca, later legacy culture on top, and then you have the Spanish on top of that.
Mm-hmm. With
But
the gray
below,
contour.
what do we have in front? We have these bevel blocks again. And it's like, what is this about? Now, first things I've been told, and that you're probably thinking when you see this, you're like, oh, okay, well, this is a Spanish wall, and that's a recycled piece from, the pre-Incan structure. And I'm like, okay, well, that's possible, right? It could be that we're looking at, this is maybe, if we're saying these bevel blocks are advanced, then maybe we're looking at another culture coming in and putting their mark on the site that might be divorced from the other cultures, like they weren't there at the same time, or they didn't get along. Maybe this is like a conquering
Mm.
uh, statement saying, no, no, we were here, we conquered. I'm not sure. It could also be that this culture of the pre-Incas that made this polygonal stuff, they could also do this style. I mean, that's not
Yeah,
outside the realm.
but it is just kind of weird that, yeah, I mean, like, are they in Russia or China or anywhere? I mean, this is South America, so we have Middle East, we have South America,
Mhm,
we have. I'm
mhm.
sure they're in Europe. I know I've seen them in Europe.
Yes,
Um,
yes. And they turn into like Greco, like they kind of blend into some of the Greco-Roman stuff. So you'll see some of those Greco-Roman temples that kind of get closer into the desert, they
right.
will start having walls that have bevel blocks in them. So you'll lose that smooth, flat surface of like Greco proper, like the Greek temples and stuff. And
Hmm.
as you move over toward the Middle East, these bevel blocks start kind of like incorporating themselves into those structures. And sometimes it seems original. It doesn't seem like this was a secondary culture or something. It looks like there was just a bevel block construction company that also did temples. And it's like, okay, well, you're in Greece, you want your smooth walls, we'll do the smooth walls. If you like them this texturized way, we'll do it this way for you. And it seems like this style is clustered in the Middle East, but you said, and like we're showing, it does seem to like reach out into these far flung areas. And like you're saying, Russia, that's a great one to go to next, because there's one city in Russia that makes like no sense to us, because it doesn't seem to match any other sites in Russia. Kronstadt. It's it's an old like fortified city, and it has nubs. So first of all, hey, look, nubs.
Okay, these are nubs, guys. If you don't know what a
Is
nub is, it's a protrusion from a rock that makes no sense.
and we'll get more into that because a lot of these bevel block sites also have nubs. So first of all, what are these doing in Russia if those are also in Peru, right? And Egypt and all these other places.
In China
But
and everywhere.
this area has a dock basin, an artificial water basin for ships and building ships or docking ships. I'm not sure exactly, but it was in like a naval yard. And this naval yard is built with these same blocks. And again, it's not like it's a copy. It's like it's executed the same way, like the same level of finish, the same surface treatments. It's all there. We have the polygon. And if you think, okay, well, that's just standard course architecture, that's not very impressive. Well, they also did it in a polygonal coursework.
Wow.
So it's like, all right, well, maybe there is something more going on. So yeah, we have this mix of polygonal, like Peruvian style stonework, but it's more hard angled. And there's a lot of like pentagons and hexagons in these walls. So it's almost what me and some of the other guys say. It's like whoever had the advanced tool that made the bevel blocks and the nubs, it looks like they changed the setting here and the tool like operated differently. So we have it's like a hybrid of the bevel blocks and the polygonal coursework. And then in some areas it almost turns into nubs and they're like,
Right.
small little protuberances instead of the bevels. So really wild place. It doesn't have much written history, especially not about these aspects. So until we get more information, it's kind of like just this unknown, you know, how old is it? What was its original purpose? If it was a fort, who were the original defendants of this fort? So just a really crazy place.
That's cool. I haven't actually heard
Yeah.
of this one.
And some of the patterns in the walls, you'll notice they repeat like these little like window frame or like
Yeah. On the other
and
side too.
yeah, they do this a few times. So it's like the idea that maybe some of the other guys propose on their channels about the polygonal stonework of South America, expressing words or ideas, like especially we know there's the animal depictions that they put into the
Like in
walls, like
Sexy Woman. Yeah.
yeah, like the puma and all and the snake and all
Snake.
that. So it's like we know that there's that aspect to the stonework, right? They can incorporate and hide images and information in the walls, right? Like in plain sight. So I think if you're going to entertain it in South America, you should probably try to entertain it in some place like Russia here. Like let's take that thought process and try to apply it to a site like this because it's obvious there's geometry is saying something here. Like they didn't just randomly put these together. Like they wanted this execution to look like this and it's got like
You have to have a
very
lot of
important.
thought out for this. Yeah.
Yeah, and certain areas like these window frames were very important and they wanted them to be this specific shape. So there's a story behind these and we don't know what it is, and it's like it is the story written in the stone and is it up to us to decipher what the message in stone is? And that's probably a good segue to the nubs because
Yeah.
again, I think the nubs are literal language of some kind in the stone that they've impregnated into the stonework.
Okay, so give us a brief overview of where nubs and some good examples of them. I mean, the
I
first
think
nubs I ever took notice of in real life was at Olive Tomblay.
that's a good place to go. Peru is like the archetypal place to find nubs, and the nubs in Peru are like the more genuine. We'll say some of these other nubs and other sites, they've had longer histories. There's been more travel through them. People have come in and messed with them, maybe broken off nubs. It seems like in Peru they were venerated. The cultures that came after were very respectful. So these nubs can be kind of fragile, and we'll show you an example here. So it's very hard to carve this first of all, but second of all, it's very easy to break these off,
That's a
and
big
all
O nub.
and it has a hole going through it. This is a variation.
Oh
It's got
yeah.
a
Whoa.
vertical hole running through it. So first thing we'll notice in Peru is that these nubs are different. Like they're not all just a boop on a stone. They take on different characteristics.
Some are
They all,
like square and some are perfect round. Like they're not necessarily uniform. They come in all shapes and sizes.
yeah, and it's like they had almost like a Swiss Army knife ability with them, so that if they needed a task done that could be done with a nub, they could make a nub to fulfill that task. So maybe with this one, with the hole going through it, there was some kind of extra infrastructure that they like installed, a
Hmm.
pipe or a rope or something, right?
Right.
And it did a function. So in this case, this nub was likely made for a functional reason, to like be part of a mechanism, or uh,
Yeah. I mean,
even
like
just
I really have started thinking about them, and like I know Ziggy really thinks that they're a Mason's code, and
that's
yeah,
part of it. They technically, yes, they are that, but it's like it's so hard to
I think they
really
could
let.
be sockets and plugs too. Like they literally
Sure.
could have been part of. I don't know.
It's like one of those things where you have to get together in your head what you want to ask about the nubs. Do you want to know what they are? Okay, well, to know what they are, you kind of have to know how they were made.
Yeah, but
And
here's
then
the thing: is like we can even if we nailed it, if even if I was like, oh yes, they're this, and it was
mhm,
like, yeah, I mean, there's no way to verify it.
right?
So it's almost like at some point you just have to go like, what they really are is signifiers that there was a cross communicational. I mean, that there was a international.
Hmm.
Before we were global, we were global.
Yes, that's kind of the we need to like take all the steps back and get like a broad um a, get our heads wrapped around like a broad idea with the nubs. Like don't try to go straight for the answer of what they are, how they were made. Let's look at what we can say for sure about them, right?
And what
And
we
we can,
can say for sure about them is that they're everywhere. They're
yes.
everywhere.
So
And
start there. Just start with that, and take all biases and preconceived notions out, and just say, all right, I'm willing to accept that these are all around the world. So let's look at them all around the world and see if there's connections and patterns and more that we can infer beyond just they're all around the world.
mhm.
So
Okay, so then how do you, side
okay.
note,
Mhm.
how do you okay, so for me, I have basically taken timelines, and anytime anybody tells me this site is this old, whether it's like, oh, this is 1,000 years old, or this is like a Gobekli Tepe, like whatever, 11,000 years old, I just am like,
Mhm.
bullshit. I don't care what you say. I don't care at all about the dating of any sites. Now, I've like completely let go of that. That was a
I
very hard
appreciate
unlearning that I've had to do, and that was a
it.
very like I held on to that real tight.
Yeah.
But right now I can't compartmentalize all these things because like these Peru this supposed to be 1,500 years old, okay, and
Yeah.
then you got like Baalbek or something, which is supposed or like whatever Gobekli Tepe, or you have
Mhm.
Malta. These are supposed to be like 10,000, 8,000 years ago, like whatever. I don't know. The datings don't match up. And so I have a lot of people that will argue with me like, well, it doesn't matter because these are nowhere near each other in the timeline.
Yeah, purportedly, right? Yeah, allegedly. But my favorite response to that, I think it's one of the best one-liners that Joe Rogan ever had, when he was talking about the Great Pyramids and the stories about who built them. Joe Rogan said, "Well, people are full of s, and that story sucks." And it's like, I love that, right? It's most people are full of s, and that is a lousy story. So I always ask people, okay, how much of what you know about history are words from some other person, some other human? You know, how much of your worldview of history is dictated by the words of another human? And you'll find that 99% of what people know about history, it's like, well, the Romans and the Carthaginians, and the 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 founding of Rome with Romulus and Remus, and the military history of the Persians and all this. And it's
Mhm.
like, you everything you've stated could be a complete fabrication by a government official, a religious official, a military official. Like, there are so many
I mean, and you can
opportunities.
really see that now in our modern times. How like
Better.
look how reliable our
Yeah,
media is. It's just like I don't care which political side of the spectrum you sit on. Like if you think that they that they're doing a fair job of recording actual history as it's going down, like I think you'll be sorely mistaken. Come,
agreed.
you know.
Yeah, and it's
So
like the
what makes
people
us
talk
think it was
about
different back then?
exactly. You say that there's a few accounts that post. It's a reoccurring tweet where it's if you think the current news is bad, just imagine how bad history is. And it's like, yeah, lately I think we've all realized that if this is how the news is going today, and we're supposed to be the pinnacle of like disclosure and
Right.
transparency and cutting edge technology, and we're still being lied to this bad. Imagine how bad it was back when you didn't have the internet and it was way easier to lie to people. When you had all the books under your control and you controlled who got to read your books
Right. You
and
could control who could read. You could, yeah.
even control who could read, right? So yeah,
Right.
the
Right.
censorship goes way back, and it is probably a lot worse the farther back you go. So what I like to tell people is take all those words of those people that you've heard that history from, the mythology, the military accounts, all these things, put them in a little box. Don't throw them away, but put them in a little box and sit them off to the side. And just like title that box all the things I've been told about history, right? And keep that over there. And then go look for yourself at things that are verifiable to everybody, like these photographs of the ancient architecture. Because what I tell people all the time is stone cannot lie to you, right? It can't like make up a history. It is what it is.
And it
It what
cannot be aged, really.
set in stone is a phrase for a reason.
Hmm.
So what you find when you take the ancient ruins at face value is that they're telling you something way different than what academia is telling you about how they were built, when they were built, and who built them. So we have we have these traces that are going against what the academic narrative is. That they're saying isolated, we didn't have contact across the oceans, primitive, we were stone tools and maybe a little bit of copper that we could smelt if we were lucky to find some. But this kind of stuff is far beyond any kind of bronze work. Is far beyond anything like a clever concrete or some kind of
Hmm.
uh, regional alchemical potion. It can't work regionally because the same process is global.
So it's
So
not done everywhere. Yeah, and I mean, even if we want to just go with the sheer size of some of these things, it just doesn't add up into what they're telling you that we do. When things like have these, like a bevel block is a very specific thing. Polygonal, that's a very specific thing. A nub is a very specific thing. A pinch
yes,
hole, which are these other, like, do you have examples of some pinch holes to show them?
yeah, we'll get into those too. So, and this is a good place to bring it up because Peru seems to have all of the hallmarks, right? These
Right, but
these
it's only supposed to be like 1500 years old or
yeah.
2000 years old at max.
So I'm putting that timeline in a box of stuff I've been told. And I'm putting that off to the side
Yeah.
because I don't know if it's true or not. I'll keep that date around for later reference, right? But right now I'm going to look at the architecture because the architecture can't lie to me. So we have nubs at the Coricancha, which is like the holy of holies in Cusco, Peru. We have nubs in very precise block work. This isn't beveled. It has mitered corners, like you can see they're like scalloped corners.
Hmm.
A lot of the stonework in Peru has kind of like smoothed or troweled corners somehow, but it doesn't mean that it's not advanced. Like this is still obviously advanced. The precision involved, the mathematics of the course layers and the block dimensions. This is all done, perfectly, masterfully. So we have nubs here in an orientation that okay. It's not something to lift the stone by to put it in place because they're not on every block. These
Right.
are these were deliberately put onto the corner of this wall, and we have to figure out why.
And if they were for lifting, like that's what the mainstream narrative tells you guys.
It is.
That's what they
It
say.
is.
Okay, so if they really were for lifting, then why would they not file that off? Like they can
Yeah,
make it as precise as those are. Like they're
yeah,
not attractive by my mind's eye. Maybe they thought it was attractive, but I mean, you would file it flat if it didn't have
mhm,
any more purpose than to lift it.
yes. And there are examples where they get so small that that idea just goes out the window, right? It's just this no
Yeah,
longer
what's going to
works.
hold that?
And these placements, that's not where you put the nubs if you're going to lift them. And this block is about, a little bit bigger than cinder block size. So you're not needing these nubs. You've got like some kind of fictional little miniature crane in your head that's moving these around when it's really doesn't take but a few people to lift them. So that idea is out. Like, and another thing I want to bring up is the size of these precision blocks does not necessarily indicate, you know, the bigger the block, the more advanced. Because even in this smaller block work, they're still working with these tight tolerances, this geometry, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the, all the
Yeah, we
all
know
the
what you're talking about.
principles, the principles are still there in the smaller block work. So I think in most cases it's just they've decided to change their block dimensions or they've changed the design of their structure and the design change calls for smaller blocks, or just easier to work with. Who knows the reason? And lots of reasons could be proposed, but you have to look at it in reference to the larger, you know obviously advanced stuff. Are those hallmarks from the obviously advanced stuff repeating in some of this other potentially related stuff? And nubs are like the number one, aha, it's related. Because
Yeah,
how
because
else?
what an obscure, weird thing to.
Yeah, what an obscure weird thing to be repeating around the world.
Yeah,
I mean, and always in the same kind of configuration where they don't look like they were for lifting. They don't look like they were going to be carved into something later.
they're
It
all over
just
the block. They can be at the bottom of it, the top of it. They can be in the center of it. They can be, I mean, they can be on cornerstones, middle of stones. They can be huge. They can be little. They're like
no rhyme or reason sometimes, but like you can kind of pick up that there is something deeper. It's just
and
either not
the ones that are really
understandable.
weirding me now are the ones in India because they'll be here's the other thing that you found on and I've seen you point this out a couple of times, Andrew. They'll be on bedrock carvings.
Yes,
So
and in Peru as
what is
well.
that about?
So we'll stay in Peru because Peru is like the greatest, hub right now for all these things. So in Ollantaytambo, we both like that site. It's got nubs, it's got the polygonal blocks, it's got like huge megalithic blocks, but also it has the smaller like cellular coursework. It has some really unique stuff like the large I guess megalithic wall segment, the fragment of wall that's left at the top of the hill. You never see this kind of execution anywhere else in the world with these slim like shim stones.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever design they were going off of at Ollantaytambo was very unique. Like nowhere else did they decide to use this technique. But what does overlap? The nubs. So we've got nubs again. And obviously in this case, you're not going to put lifting bosses on these slim shim stones. That's not how you would lift things. It's just not, no, that's not working.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look really close, some of these nubs have like divots under them, and it's like they've got more traces going on. You got to look like it's like a resolution war. We are fighting for like the best resolution photos. And anytime we get a photo like this where we can see the scoop marks and stuff, it's like this is the evidence that everyone needs to be looking at. Not some 400 by 600 240p, grainy tourist photo from 1989. Like you're not going to see this kind of stuff. And if you don't see these details, you're going to think that what we're talking about is just make believe, because it takes this high resolution to really get in here and see, oh, it's not just a blob or a blur. That's some kind of protuberance. That's a manufactured aspect of the stone. And like with these patterns, these patterns might be manufactured the same way as the nubs. Whatever tool is creating the nubs, it could be the sculpting tool that's doing the rest of this as
Yeah,
well.
I like that step motif there. It's nice.
Yeah, and the step motif, Phil and I from Ancient Alternative View have a video about this motif in particular and where it goes all the way around the world. It shows up in, textiles, it shows up in architecture, it shows up in mosaic floors. So it's one of those hallmarks that you see it in association with these others, and not in just one place, but around the world. So it's like multiple confirming locations of these same hallmarks. So Ollantaytambo has the blockwork nubs. So the ones that people would maybe be able to propose were somehow used to lift the blocks into place, just because they're giant blocks. Okay, maybe. Well, they've got them in the bedrock too. So we've got areas where they've cleaved back the cliff side and made up like a sheer surface,
Mm-hmm.
and then it looks like they've pulled like taffy nubs out from that surface. And there's like a pattern to it, but the pattern doesn't really have a rhyme or reason. Um, let's see, we'll go down to a real clear one here. Here's a side profile. I mean, just really odd.
Yeah. Wow.
They're just like pulled out like taffy, and in this case, they look almost like snipped off,
Or sculpted. Yeah.
or yeah, they were they sculpted to a finish. But it's like, what purpose? Now these kind of have an upward angle to them,
Yeah.
so maybe something could be hung from them. You know, we talk about, well, it's obviously not lifting because a rope will slide right off of that. So does
This
the
is on the
profile?
bedrock.
Yes, yes. So you have to look at their profiles and ask yourself, does the profile match what the function is that they're
I
telling
don't
you?
know. Half the time, I'm starting to just go like, these people weren't us people. Like these were not.
The mindset was different, right? Like we
It's
can't
definitely yeah.
our minds to what this was, because it wasn't meant to be understood by minds like ours. I really don't think it was. This is a whole other, maybe even independently evolved civilization. So like they took a completely different path. So this kind of stuff, it would be as close to alien
Yeah.
as you could get. You know,
And
if
this what they do it so pervasively around the world that it isn't hard. Whatever they're doing isn't hard for them to do this.
no, and
This
we'll show.
isn't labor intensive to the point of like they didn't have somebody carving in this random place in the bedrock for like
No,
75 years to get that, which is like, like they that with a chisel and hammer would take you. But like
a
whatever
lot
they
of
did, it was easy to do this.
a lot of these look like they were done almost instantly. Like we're talking about hot knife through butter type of
Mm-hmm.
scenario. So like really
Like,
quick. And there's sometimes we'll see errors in their work, and these kind of errors only happen if you're moving quick and you're kind of careless with your tool. Like
right.
a guy with a chainsaw making an error going really fast is a different trace than a guy chiseling away for weeks and making an error, right?
Right. On one
That
level, yeah.
you can make a quick oops and make a mark, or you could chisel for months and realize, oh, that's not quite right. But you can see that it took a month for you to get that far. Whereas with these other ones, it really looks like an instantaneous cut, laser melting, vibrating the stone. We're open to what the tech is, to talking about it, but
Yeah.
it's something. It is something advanced,
It's
something
something we don't currently have too.
like
Like I don't
divine.
like when people like kind of go like, well, they must have had like circle saws and yeah, like
That's
diamond
not
drill
enough.
bits and stuff like that. I'm going, well, no, whatever they had is we don't have what they had. Like because we don't, I don't know.
Because like yes, there are cut marks, and there's other channels like Uncharted X that like to point out the cut marks,
Uh-huh.
but I'm not sure how the cut marks were made. Like these cut marks go right up, abruptly up against this vertical plane with no overcutting, and it's just like it's a
Or it's
weird
like that thing that
pattern.
Tina from Curious Beings was showing in a current video that she did. What was oh, it's somewhere in China where they are carved in cave. It's like chisel marks right next to each other, kind of thing. But
Long U caves, yeah, Long
long
U
you
caves has,
caves.
or one of the other ones around there, but those have the machining marks, and that's a great segue, because like you said, we're talking about bedrock nubs. Let's go over to Yangshan, China, because that's one of those that I love to show people like right out of the gate, because they look at it and they go, no, that's you what? No, you can't do this. It's way too big. So it's called a quarry, Yangshan, China. There are three major carved elements here. The first one, and like the most what, is this oval monolith of stone kind of in the middle,
Those are
and
probably
it's
the biggest nubs in the world.
probably the biggest nubs in the world, and they're like peppered on this thing. They're not like evenly spaced
Right.
across along a line. They're like, yeah, like higgledy piggledy,
Yeah,
and the profiles are kind of all over the place. Like this one looks like it was pulled up a little bit. This one was pulled out toward us a little bit. This one was pulled down.
yeah.
This one was pulled up, and it's like, so if you want to say they're for lifting this thing, first of all, this thing is enormous. So what kind of crane are you talking about? What kind of, scaffolding and tackle? How much rope? Like, you start doing the numbers, guys. Start adding
And
all
then,
this stuff
and
up.
not only like the kind of like what it would require to move that, if it isn't bedrock, but
Mhm.
which it's not bedrock because it is by a quarry, and you can see the ones that are still connected in a minute.
This
But
one might be undercut, right? It's been backfilled with soil, so we don't actually know if this is
how?
actually loose from the bedrock or not. Yeah,
Okay. Well, but you know, like with like we don't have any evidence of any of the cranes that they ever used, or any of these really advanced lifting. I mean, if, like, you know, there's a lot of those videos going around of like them putting like marble in the back of a truck, and it's like brr. I mean,
sure.
or
I saw that. Yeah, but
yeah.
that is a giant dump truck, with a load capacity that's rated for things like this,
I
and
mean, even our
engineers.
biggest cranes in the world they can't lift the pregnant woman at Baalbek. I mean,
Right.
it's
I've got a great photo showing cranes all the way around it and how it would be picked up if they could. But yeah, you get all the cranes around it and pick it up, and then what happens? How do you move it?
yeah, exactly. Then
All
what
the
do you do
cranes
with
have
it?
to
Because you
come
had to
together.
have cranes everywhere around. And then how are you going to transport it?
Yeah, yeah. The road grade has to be perfect. I did a little short video on Twitter of just how to move a skid of like heavy buckets around, and even the smallest little grade on something like that will hang you up. And if you don't have a smooth surface or a way to jack it up, you're gonna get hung up on every single little grade. And the story for this site is they were going to make some, dedicated votive stela or obelisk of some kind, and they got this far in the carving, and then they realized that they weren't going to be able to move it, so that's why they stopped. It's like,
Uh-huh.
okay, the planner should have been hung or shot or driven out of town, because
That's a lot of
you
work to do before you realize, oh, this might be too big.
how far in are we here? Like, how much time, if you want to go with copper chisels, how much time do we have invested in this at this point, that that they just abandon, that they just,
Yeah.
oh well, that's 6 months, or that 2 years, or however 10 years, however long we've been carving this.
Okay, well,
All for nothing.
that is a good segue or interesting question is what do you think of? I mean, like if you look at like the unfinished obelisk and like Ajwan Quarry, or you look at it like why are there so many of these unfinished things? Like why are like in fact most of these megalithic sites,
Hmm.
it's hard to tell if they're unfinished or if they were just destroyed, and we don't,
Well,
it's like we don't really know. But there does like Nubs is a perfect example of something that seems a little unfinishedy. So what do
yeah.
you think is up with all of that? Like the fact that there's a lot of things that don't seem like they were completed.
Well,
Even
Dan brought that up in your last conversation. Dan Stevens brought that up. He said, what we notice most of the time, it's either or both unfinished, destroyed. It's either unfinished or destroyed, or it's unfinished and it's destroyed. So like Baalbek, it's unfinished and it's destroyed. And
yeah.
a lot of these other sites where it's like, well, it was unfinished, and then another culture came in, and then it was destroyed. So it's like you had these compounding stories and timelines for these places. But for me, what I see with the unfinished nature, like you said, especially with the nubs, what it looks like to me is haste. Like they were on a time crunch.
Yeah,
Like this stuff
I
was
feel
done in
that
a
too.
hurry. It feels like they were short on time, and a lot of this stuff got built in a hurry. And the reason why these like hiccups, maybe we'll call these like nubs and stuff, like hiccups or goofs in their construction process, the reason why they happen like this is because they were working fast, and these little
Yeah, and it was more about
errors,
function than aesthetics.
whatever they were working with and what they were doing, they were trying to get it done in in some kind of quick fashion, where maybe the energy source on their tool was only good for so long. Like, who knows? Maybe there was certain conditions where the tool worked, and then other conditions where the tool wouldn't work. So it looks like they are doing something really quickly. Like they've got the plan in their heads. They know the planning is already there. Like they know what they're going to do,
Mm.
and they're working real fast to achieve it. Like the Aswan Quarry unfinished obelisk. They knew the dimensions of what that was going to be, and they were working real hard to finish it. And it looks like they were doing, a pretty good job. They had it roughed out. And then some people say, oh, well, a crack developed. And then other
Yeah,
people say,
they
oh,
say
well,
that
that,
a lot with all the Seraphim too. They'll be like, "Oh, well, they stopped working on, or there's a crack in this one, so that's why that one's not moved into here." And you're like, "No, I don't think so."
and
But
there's an assumption about when the crack was done. So was the crack already there? Were they planning on fixing the crack? Was that part of their, tech? Or did their tech cause the crack? Or, did the crack happen way after they were gone? So, that might not be the damning evidence that everyone thinks it is, that oh, the crack is why they stopped. It could be more likely that they ran out of time, that they're like they got discovered,
no, it does
or
feel like there was, like that's why, and they talk like Dan was talking about the cargo coat thing, where it's
Mhm.
like people come in. It almost makes you think that like something came down here and was like, yeah, let's build a bunch of stuff, and then what? Oh, never mind, we're leaving. Come on, we gotta go.
It does look like they just came in, did it, and took off, because there's like a silence about this architecture all around the world. We've asked the sages in India, we've asked the wisdom keepers in Peru. No one has the story on the nubs, regardless of the region. You get a few quaint, you know, maybe there's a little thread of truth in it, like oh, they were used for shadows, and the certain time of day the shadow would cast a certain way, and that would say something, kind of
I
like a
mean,
sundial.
the
Maybe
thing
that's
like
part of it, but
the thing
that's
I
not the
like
whole.
the most, and I always go back to this, and I know there's no basis for it, and even if I was right, there'd be no way to verify it. But it's just like people aren't taking into context the ability of piezoelectricity. Like,
Yeah.
when you have any kind of quartz within a stone, which a lot of these are, granites, which do have a composite of stone of quartz and stuff in them. If you stress if you stress quartz and you like have it in a compacted thing, it literally will put off, like it'll emit an energy. So I think that like what people don't realize, we don't have the ability to do it now, but like those, like what they call them, the something sticks, where you can put your hand on either side of it. They have them at like
Hmm.
Hobby Lobby or something. Just your body heat alone can turn on the light, right? Well, I
Hmm.
think
Right.
there's I think with certain rocks, particularly if it has any percentage of quartz within its like microscopy,
Yeah.
you could probably use it as an energy source.
Yeah.
That's I think,
Or use it with your energy,
or use it with your energy source. Yeah, it could be a conductor or an
yeah,
amplifier for your
yeah.
energy
I
tool.
like that. Yes, I think so too. It's like the quartz like it was almost like they got better results if the rock had more quartz in it, right? And like
Yeah.
especially with Egypt, you see some like really ornate, very fine stuff like alabaster. Alabaster, they make stuff that it's so thin you can shine a flashlight through and see, through it, and it's the precision on some of that stuff. And then of course you have another hallmark, the keystone clamps. These metal clamps that connect the blocks in some cases, like
Those
in
are
Egypt.
everywhere. Yeah.
Well, if there's some kind of energetic transfer in the blocks with the quartz content, maybe these keystone clamps are also a conductor, or a grounding system, or who knows what the purpose is. But I
Yeah.
think when we're talking electricity, I think we're getting close to it, because that's one thing no one's bringing up. Like, there is an electrical component. It seems like there's arcing
I
and
mean,
burning
and I
and
can't get away from the fact that they look like sockets and plugs. Like you have
right.
so many of the
Yeah.
holes in them too, that where they shouldn't be, like where they aesthetically will even put holes, like particularly in Egypt, into where there's a sculpture or like a really, I mean, I don't know, like
Yeah.
or in it's even in India, and you're just kind of yeah, that's the realm in which I go into, but
Hmm.
I don't know. It could be all BS as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's if you have to look at it like, okay, what kind of energy source would you need? Okay, I'm thinking like nuclear, I'm thinking
Yeah.
electrical, I'm thinking like frequency and vibration and sound. A lot of people on Twitter have been talking about that lately. Like
Hmm.
what kind of sound would this technology would what kind of sounds or harmonies would it have made, or was it a horrible screeching sound this technology
Like
worked with?
honestly, if it could read or if it could move a rock, it would be inaudible
Yeah,
for us.
like
Like I
it
feel
may,
like it
yeah,
would have to be a frequency that we could, like a dog
ultrasonic.
whistle. Yeah.
Could, yeah, yeah, really makes you wonder because it's like we know how our power tools today sound, and they're based off of like electricity, spinning motors, things like drills and hammers, like jackhammers, things like that. So you've got the pneumatic sounds, the electrical motor sounds.
Yeah.
They make like a whirring. There's a frequency to it,
There
and
is
I wonder.
frequency, and just like there's like the visual light spectrum, there is also an audible spectrum. Like we can only
Sure.
hear ranges of frequencies in a certain level or between certain benchmarks, and like there's stuff that we can't hear, and same thing with the visual too. I
And I'm
mean,
sure you've heard that there's people who can, opera singers and people who can hit that note that'll shatter like a champagne glass across the room. So, but yeah, I think
people
that
can do
the frequency idea maybe married with the electricity idea, right? So you have
I think so.
sound and energy. The energy is creating sound, or the sound is creating energy to do this. I think it has to be something on this scale. Like I like to relate the nubs to welding. So
Yeah.
if you know anything about welding, you're adding metal to metal. So in this, just remove the word metal and add stone. You're adding stone to stone, or you're manipulating stone in a softened state via with welding is electricity, isn't it? And sometimes gases. So you have like argon gas used in certain kind of welding, and different types of metals require different techniques for melding for welding. So maybe these guys are the stone welders, and their tech can soften stone, weld stone together. Like there's plasma torches that cuts metal. So maybe they had a plasma torch that could cut stone. I mean, some of these cuts, like the this obelisk monolith here, the one that's still in the quarry. These are like super straight cuts over
Yeah.
a really long
Long
distance,
period of time.
and sometimes very skinny, tight areas to get in there to swing a hammer or something. Like it's,
Yeah.
I don't think it's
Even
a
that
hammer.
little channel in that. Yeah.
So I mean, some of this stuff is just like there's no other way to get to achieve these kind of surfaces
I mean,
than with.
and the story, the mainstream narrative story is that it is either Stone Age people,
Mhm.
depending on which site you're going to, or it's if it wasn't in the 1900s, we didn't have electricity, okay? So before, like if it's 1800s and below, which is most of all of human history, then you're
Right.
talking about they're doing all of this shit with their hands.
And beasts of burden, right? Like you've got maybe
Yes.
some animals to pull some of this stuff, maybe a lot of slave labor or
And even
conscripted
like
labor.
slave labor doesn't it's still human being. It's like what are you talking about? That doesn't solve the construction problem here.
Right. It doesn't
Crazy.
solve the equation. Like the numbers involved cannot be uh, ratified by more humans. Like you can throw all the humans you want at this, they're not going to be able to achieve this. It's just
No,
the
yeah.
skill involved, the mindset behind it, the mathematics and the geometry and all these principles that seem to have been mastered. It's not like they just started this and this is their first time trying it. It seems like they've done this before. And like at Yangshan here, there's areas of this quarry where other large pieces of stone have obviously been removed. So
Yeah.
these pieces weren't the first pieces to be
Where are
quarried.
those? Yeah.
These were the last pieces that didn't get finished, that got left behind. They were doing a lot more here before that. So it's like what we're seeing is the remnants, the crumbs of the quarry, the unnecessary bits. So what was it that they actually did quarry out? Where are these even bigger chunks? That's the big mystery. Where did all this stone go?
Where yeah, exactly.
And it
Um
wasn't just pounded up into smaller stones. Otherwise, you'd have a heap of gravel around here, and there is no gravel piles of them pounding it up into smaller stones. It's just sheer cliff sides and cut bedrock. That is it.
Crazy.
It is crazy.
And the
It really.
thing is it's like this is just one of your many folder like things in your folder. I mean, like this stuff when you really start digging into it, uh, like I probably look at a site a day or something, and you'll never run out of sites. You're
You
never gonna
never will.
Yeah,
I'm
and
still
I
finding,
learn about a new site basically every week, and I'm like, what? Like the one
and
that I'm obsessed with this week is the one that Santos was putting up about the one in Italy. Um,
Bamarzo,
yeah,
yeah,
Bamarzo.
or just the forest around there, right? There's a lot of really cool like bedrock cut stuff in there. It's very Peruvian looking in some
I
places.
mean, that never was on. I look at this stuff all the time for like years now,
Yeah,
and that never even crossed my path till right now. Like, there's so much stuff. Like, I don't know if we'll ever be able to know it all, which is great actually.
yeah.
But it makes you realize that something went on that we don't know about, or we aren't talking about, or we aren't something. There's something that we are not puzzle pieced together, and it's not like, me, Tarzan, you, Jane. It's not that story.
Oh no. And like you said, like you think about all the sites you've become aware of in such a short time. Now imagine how many people out there don't have any of these sites in their Rolodex of ancient places. Like, okay, I know Rome, I know the Parthenon, I know the Acropolis in Athens, I know, okay, Gobekli Tepe, I hear that word a lot. I definitely know Egypt and the pyramids. Okay, there's the Holy Land, there's some important old stuff there. It's like there's a
Every
very
country has something.
short list in people's minds of ancient places. And you realize it's like a lot of these people who say they're authorities in ancient architecture or ancient mysteries, and even people in our kind of circle of these alternative thinkers, you press them on how many sites they know, and
No,
they
they
don't
know
know.
Egypt and they know Peru. That's about it.
I
Yeah.
mean, you show them a picture like one of these, and like, where's that? I'm like, you don't know where that is? Like, you of all people who seem to be masters and complete professionals over like one region, like you said, Peru or Egypt or these more popular regions and sites, but then they are completely ignorant to all these satellite
Well,
sites
and
and
I
all
mean,
these other.
I guess there's only so much a person can take in, but I mean, you're right though. I mean, like there is a lot to look into. There really is, but it's one of those things where so let's play speculation game. Like that's fun.
Mhm.
What do you think this is? What do you think went on? What do you think happened? What's your I have my own opinions, but
Mhm.
what's your what about what's Mr. Andrew coming to a conclusion of today? And I'm going to reserve the right that you can change your mind in the future, okay? But
Sure.
as of what you know right now, what's your brain thinking?
Okay, well, I've narrowed it down to two broad possibilities that could be refined further, but I think we're dealing with at least two possibilities that are pretty likely. And the first one is a terrestrially based civilization. In other words, it was always from Earth, and the mystery is just that it has disappeared through cataclysm or changes in environment or plagues wiping civilizations out. It could be Mother Nature has erased this culture from our history, and they were us, and they were just a completely different version of us,
Right, but
and
just as advanced
and just
or more advanced.
as or more advanced or differently advanced, right? Differently capable. So I have a few problems. Like it's kind of like
But for me, I kind of feel like that is becoming the new mainstream narrative.
well, it's one of those things you have to grapple with because it doesn't really satisfy all the features of everything that we see.
Yeah.
So you have this really weird alien looking architecture with nubs on it. But then you have very classical, formal, like Greco-Roman style stuff with nubs on it. And it has statues of humans. Like these statues aren't the elongated skull people. These statues aren't of reptilians or Cthulhu or any of these other ideas of what yes, there are stylized statues of zoomorphic animals. Like Egypt will have, you know, um, like Horus and Osiris,
Or
and
yeah,
of
all of their animal, like the sock mitt and like whatever. Yeah.
course, all those. So, there is a little bit of that going on, but it's not like the little green man isn't ever, shown on the wall
Until you
as
go
a
to
building.
petroglyphs. and then those are
Yeah,
still, yeah.
but then you have to wonder with petroglyphs because it's not advanced. Like it is just paint. It's red ochre paint smeared on the rock, and any primitive person could do that. Now maybe the things that they're
Although I did
depicting.
watch that video, Cave of the Forgotten or
Did
something.
you?
I
That's a
watched
good.
that last night. Man,
Yeah,
that's good art for, it's supposed to be 32,000 years ago. That's good art for today. Like I don't know very many people that could paint that today.
I agree. The person or the people who did that had like a master
They knew
of
shading, they knew like,
shading, perspective.
and in their
Just
head too. They weren't obviously looking at the lion and the buffalo and the
and
rhino like inside the cave.
and they did it in the dark with poor oxygen levels, with poor lighting. A torch.
Yeah.
So you're up a Rembrandt or a Picasso, and you can paint in the dark. So but I think that there is a potential for a terrestrial only and always terrestrial answer,
Mm-hmm.
that it is a offshoot of humans or a genetic divergence of humans or something. But the problem I have with that is the development process, right? So I'm not seeing here is our first nub site we ever tried to build.
Yep.
Here is where we got better at building with nubs. Here is where we, mastered the nubs. It all just shows up fully formed and fully mastered. Like they showed up with full power on their tech. So
Yeah, and abandon it everywhere.
yes. So I'm kind of on the fence with these two possibilities. One, obviously terrestrially based, Atlantis-like scenario, that could have been influenced by their own capriciousness or cataclysm, and that is why they were, wiped out without a trace. But there's also a legitimate case to be made for non-terrestrial contact. I mean, you're going to get labeled a kook regardless of where you stand in this field. So go ahead and go full kook. Just go ahead and say, hey, it could be. And until you have damning evidence that says it isn't, I'm going to keep that door open. And people don't like it when you do that. You're like,
Well,
they think it lowers you or belittles you or just,
yeah, exactly.
makes you less of a researcher. And I'm like, well, I've gone through all the banal and rudimentary explanations for this stuff. Oh, they had a quaint little plant in that region that if you mixed it together and you left it overnight on a stone, it would etch the rock a little bit. And then they just scaled this up. And it's like, okay, if that was possible at the size and level you're saying it is, it also would have had to have been replicated all around the world. So these guys must have took this
I guess that's
concoction
true.
with them around the
Good
world,
point. Yeah.
or they knew how to remake this concoction wherever they went. So they were masters of botany and chemistry around the world.
Well,
So
and then you're dealing with like magical wizards or something,
you're
and I'm
dealing with like
fine with
an
that too.
alchemical, right? An alchemical wizard at that point. So even at that stage, it's outside the realms of just,
Acceptability, yeah.
yeah, of being acceptable, right? Yeah, it's like even if you want to keep it terrestrial, we're talking about alchemical wizards. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, beyond that, hell, alien invasion. Let's just say it. I mean, there could have been a completely separate group of beings that
Now,
came
for
down.
me, aliens, I also have started to think like that's also, you could put that in the box of what have you been told,
Very good point. Yes, right. Because
so
all we have are other people's video, and who knows if
yep.
you can trust some of that stuff. And all we have beyond that is
I
testimony.
and I'm a person who has had experiences. Like I've had beings come into my room and stuff. I don't know where they're from. I don't
Mhm.
know if I just have an open third eye or if like like if my pineal gland just gets like knocked to hell sometimes or something. I don't know. I don't know
I've
what
seen,
this. Yeah.
yeah, I've seen aerial phenomenon too, and it's like what I saw. It could have been explained away as military. It could
Yeah.
have been explained away as a faulty commercial airline. I mean, who knows what I was looking at? But I've seen things where I'm like, that's not normal. That doesn't look like the normal flight pattern of a plane. I have a flight path over my house. I see the planes come and go. I know the directions. There's been a couple times where there have been phenomena that I would at least entertain the idea of it being related to this stuff.
Hmm.
If we're talking about non-terrestrial entities, I might have seen something that could have been related to that, but it's one of those things. It's like the guys who do the remote viewing and the people who do the dowsing and some of the these tools of detective
Esoteric
work,
tools. Yeah.
but yeah, they're esoteric. They can't really be verified. If you do a remote viewing session, it's like, well, this person had a vision and they're going to impart what they saw to you. Well, are you going to trust everything that they said from a vision? Like they have nothing to unless they're saying, well, I can tell you if you look at this place that I remote viewed had this detail, and if you look up a photo, you'll see this detail. Like I need to see some kind of like real world connection that corroborates this kind of esoteric um, investigation, like this detective work of the esoteric, and you could say it's like the woo woo stuff. You know, I'm okay to entertain some of that stuff as long as you can bring it back to reality and base it in something tangible. Because if even it might be true what you're saying, but if we can't validate what you're saying, the evidence isn't really worth anything. It's not useful. It could be the best evidence in the world, but if you can't convince people, it's not the best evidence in the world, is it?
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, I love the woo. I'm all about the woo.
I like
But
going into it, yeah, because it's refreshing. You get your brain spun up, and it's like I've got all
well,
new
yeah, and
possibilities to
you
think
don't
about.
have to get married to any of it. Like you
Oh,
just have to like date it a little bit. You just
yeah,
have to kind of be like, okay, well,
dip,
like that's an interesting thing to consider.
dip your toe in it. And like I tell people, it's like you will be a better researcher, a more well-rounded, you know, easier to be resolute in debate, or just harder to be swayed in debate, right? So you're not going to be manipulated in a debate if you have a well-rounded view of all this stuff. If
Yeah.
you know the
You're
mainstream,
open-minded.
yeah, you got to know the mainstream, and you got to know the woo, because you could get attacked in a debate and someone could start bringing up woo, and if you don't know your way around the woo, you could get wrapped up into agreeing with something that you don't really believe or you don't really understand. And the same with the mainstream though. So it's like you could be getting yourself wrapped up into all these journals and written accounts that were all just fabricated by lying politicians and lying religious
Right.
clergymen.
Zealots back then. Yeah.
So it's like, who can I trust? What can I trust? Well, it's like that Conan, the intro to the Conan movie. You cannot trust, no man, no woman, no beast. What in this world can you trust? Well, in the movie it was steel, but for us it's stone. You cannot argue with stone. Stone cannot lie to you, right? It's like a mute testimony. It is a statement that this has happened, and you have to basically decipher what the message is. How long ago did this happen? What were the circumstances that caused this to happen?
Uh-huh.
So, so you apply that kind of mindset to places like this, and it's like I don't see the mainstream story of a ceremonial uh, obelisk or stela. I'm not seeing that here. It looks like this is some advanced parts to something even bigger, and these were the extra bits that they didn't need. Like
Yeah, and
it
you especially see that with the Indian Vermanas kind of thing, or yeah.
that's a great one too. We'll jump over to India. We've kind of we have forgotten India. And India, I tell people in my catalog when I give you access, if any of you want access to my catalog, by the way, send me a tweet on Twitter. If I don't follow you, I will follow you, and then I will DM you, or you can DM me, and you just give me your email address. I'll add you to the list of permissions. You'll have all this for yourself as long as you abide by the trust and don't use it for monetization and only use it for fair use. We're good. But I tell everybody there are a few folders in this catalog that are bigger than all the others. You have Peru, Egypt, Turkey, and India. And India is a huge folder, right?
Yeah.
I've got a ton of photos of sites. I have no idea where they are because there are temples in India that have the same name, and they're in different
And
regions.
it's so weird. I spent a month in India, and the only place I went to was Mahabalipuram.
which is a cool place. There's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah.
There's there's evidence of stone manipulation here.
Is this all
There,
you have on Mahabalipuram? Because I could send you all my Mahabalipuram photos
please
later.
do. I mean, and some of it's embarrassing that I'm missing some good photos, but like I said, there's so many sites. We focus on one for a while, we move to another. We'll come back around eventually. But we've got these areas of the bedrock, these giant boulders, or mineralogy, whatever this stuff is, outcrop that's been messed with somehow by some kind of cutting tool. And then they have
I
these
I don't even
wedge
remember seeing
holes. I don't know if you know the wedge holes. This is a video we probably need
that.
to
Oh
make.
yeah, yeah. I have a bunch of photos of that. Like those weird me out too, and those are found a lot of places.
Yes, in Egypt and in Japan.
You're
So
calling them wedge holes?
that is what the mainstream. Now, here's the thing, Nikki. So I think that they are traces of whatever it was that split the stone, but I don't
But
think it
sometimes
was.
they're not, like, especially in Mahabalipuram, there were some places where it's like on the ground. They're
Yeah.
not. I don't know.
So it's like I think it's a part of the advanced toolkit. I think that we're seeing a trace that resembles those wedge holes, right? With the wooden wedges that you put in, or even metal wedges, and you hit them with a hammer in a row, and it splits the stone. There's videos online of guys doing
Yeah,
this.
yeah, I've seen them do that.
But the profiles of those kind of wedge holes are different from these. And then, of course, you have the question of, okay, Egypt and India and Japan all doing the exact same technique. Some of the stuff, it shouldn't add up the way it's adding up. So, yeah,
They're not all created equally. They are yeah.
yeah, and I can bring up some of those from Japan later, but there's just yeah, there's so many traces also in India as well as in Peru where we have nubs and pinches and different types of polygonal block work. So there's like a smorgasbord of evidence in India. So like just pick one right off the top, Trikutam Temple. Here's one where it's like you'll find with India and with some other regions, you'll only have 2 or 3 photos. Like there's only been one guy that's gone to this place with a good camera. Like this is all we have right now. So if you have like a good quality, good resolution photo like this with nubs, you got to like cherish it, hold on to it, tell everyone you know about it because these are rare. They're more rare than you think they are. Like there aren't that many people going around noticing these nubs and taking these kinds of photos. They're taking the pretty photo of like the cat sleeping on the pillar at Athens or something like that. They're not getting down in the weeds and looking at these weird bumps on stones. So it's kind of dawning on people. It's going to be a slow process, but it's starting to dawn on people that we're entering an age of technology with photos, with camera technology and with photo hosting online that we're able to go around the world and see this stuff in a way we never were before. Like before this, you had to trust Flinders Petrie or you had to trust some other, you know, millionaire antiquarian that went to this site and that, maybe hired somebody to do a cute little sketch of it that was horribly inaccurate. But, and that's what everybody would go off of. Well, that sketch, he went there, he made that sketch. So that's what it looks like. I trust him. Well, you compare a lot of those old sketches to the real thing.
Yeah, they're
A lot
very
of that's
glorified.
a lot of that stuff is glorified or just imaginative, fabricated.
Uh-huh.
So you have to look at the real McCoy, and the real McCoy are these high resolution photos. And it is only recently that we have had the resolution
Yeah.
and the cloud storage ability, the shareability, the connectability. It's like we're living in this kind of like really brief golden age where we've got all this access to these photos and they haven't censored these
I
photos and they
know,
haven't
and I
copyrighted
keep
them.
on thinking that this is the Tower of Babel, dude. Like they're not going to let this stay up for very long. Which I
If it
do think is
is,
important that you're like taking the photos. I mean, like you
right,
have
yes,
externally saved as well.
if it's going down the direction that we are talking about this history is hidden and subverted and we are a species with amnesia and perhaps the powers that be don't want us to wake up, well then yeah, of course all these photos are damning evidence that they would want to get rid of.
Right.
So
I mean, the only reason it is all up and available right now is because they must be doing something themselves. But like once
and they're getting flooded. you're getting flooded with tourist photos. You got a
Yep.
tourist a day taking photos at some of these sites, and you just can't keep up with that kind of censorship. And maybe there's not that much knowledge of this even within the controlling power structure. Like maybe they don't know about these nubs.
Yeah,
Who
that's
be
probably. But I mean, like the thing is I mean, I mean, I think that there's like what, like a whole 12 or 14 of us or something that like talk about them online that we know of.
just be two of us. So now it's growing. It just takes more people to look at it and to internalize it and let it dawn on them what the overarching theme of all this stuff is. It's like, okay, I get what they are, and I get where they are.
And
So
I get like what it means in a bigger context. I just don't know.
yeah, just start off with the basics.
Yeah.
It's advanced and it shows a connection across the world. So right there, it's a two-part lie that we were not supposed to be this advanced and we were not supposed to be this connected. Well, the stone is telling the truth and it's saying that we were both, or whatever did this was both. So either the attributions and the associations are wrong, or the level of development and skill and technology is wrong. We're dealing with a fundamental problem in our view of the capabilities and the associated parties. So one of the best ones in India, in Tamil Nadu, is this Brihadishwara temple. And when Phil and I found this, we like fell over. We spent all day, the rest of the day in India looking for all other nub sites. Well, this one temple in India has more nubs on it than I think any other site in the world. Maybe Athens, Acropolis, has a few structures with a lot of nubs on them,
Mm-hmm.
but this site is like the nub
Oh
mecca.
wow, look at it. Look at all the nubs on the little.
I mean, they're kind of hard to see, and again, there's not very many good photos. You would think that for as popular as this place is in India, that people would be taking high resolution photos of these walls here. It's really hard. And one of the coolest little discoveries that Phil and I made was we found that if you search for Tamil Nadu or Brihadishwara elephant, you
Mm-hmm.
get photos of the elephants that are in really good quality because they must have hired somebody to take elephant photos. And look what they got in the background, right?
Yeah.
Like it's unbelievable. Like this is the kind of detective work you have to do. It's like it's the elephant in the room. You can't go looking directly for what you want to find because it's not there. You have to like find this alternative route to get around to get to what you want to see. And in this case, you just search for the elephants of Tamil Nadu, and you'll get all these great photos where they've have the elephants in front of these nubbed walls, and you can see like really good detail on these nubs, like each one, the profile, the course arrangement, a little bit of polygonal stonework going on. Like you really need this kind of resolution and detail to understand what we're talking about. Like a lot of people are probably watching this on their phone, right? Like what are you guys expecting to see on your phone? Like you really need to have a big monitor, put the quality and the highest resolution, turn off all the lights. You really got to focus on this stuff because this kind of resolution is rare. You don't have people going around with $1,000 cameras all around these, sometimes dangerous sites around the world just to get photos of nubs. It's just that's not happening yet.
Well, I will start again doing that. Because now I know what to look for when I'm at. Because I'm a huge ruin traveler, but then like
Right.
before like a year ago, I didn't even know what a nub was.
And I think that's the thing is we've gotten so many tourists and visitors to these sites who have come back with an idea of something's not quite right with them. Like
Right. Like, what do you think this thing is?
they get bit by the bug of like the mystery, but they couldn't, at the time while they were there, they maybe couldn't describe what it was about the place that looked weird or what felt weird to them. But then like you start showing, well, did you see all these bumps in the stone? Like, yeah, that's one of the things I noticed that was weird. And it's like you have to kind of validate, like help them validate what they're seeing because a lot of this stuff, there's no official name or
No one
term.
says anything about it. It's not addressed, and so you kind of overlook it, like it's a.
Yeah.
Eh.
So you gotta point it out and you gotta be the person to describe it, because there is no better person right now to describe them than us in the community, because we've spent more time than anyone else looking at them, looking at all the different kinds, than arguing with people on Twitter and other places where, they have their viewpoint of maybe Peruvian nubs, but they haven't seen the ones in the old world. And it's like, okay,
Right.
well, we're gonna have to show you the ones from the old world and compare them to Peru, and you know how does that connection work? Is there a connection? Is there a path one way or the other, like a development process in Peru maybe that spread, or the other way around, and they fled to Peru. It's like there's all these different kind of timeline narratives and motives behind all this stuff. You kind of you have to divorce yourself from the story of history and like almost rewrite the entire story yourself based on the architecture. You're like, okay, well, what are some fundamental truths I know about the ancient architecture? Well, they were building all of it with this nub process, this technology or technique or skill or whatever, however it was done. We don't have to go that deep right now and say, well, we need to figure out how it was done. Well, first we just need to acknowledge that it exists. Let's do that first. Let's just acknowledge it's a phenomenon. It is real. It's in stone. And once we can all agree on, yes, I'm seeing what you're seeing, then
I
we
mean,
can take the
and
next step.
it is really bizarre that we don't really build that much with stone now. I mean, most of everything is built with, I mean, your bigger skyscrapers are steel and glass, but then your domestic homes are just wood,
Right.
or whatever
Yeah.
else. I mean,
Like, and you make the good point about cinder blocks, right? Like if archaeologists in the future came back and saw our civilization, they'd be like, oh, well, these are the cinder block builders. They
yeah,
love these cinder blocks. And for us, it's because it's the easiest, quickest way to make a block, that's got good properties, at least as close to stone properties as possible, right? For much less invested labor and effort and material. So it's an economic reason that we do it. Maybe these nubs and the way they did this was their economic reason.
yeah. Well, I mean, I mean, I don't know. You always have to like try not to put our framework on their framework, but
Right, right.
but at the same time, it is. Yeah, like I said, I keep on saying like this would not have been hard for them because they do it pervasively, and
Yes.
you know, yeah, it's
If it was like a one-off thing at a couple sites, then yeah, maybe we could talk then about like an alchemical thing that they did, or it was really secret and special, like the philosopher's stone, right? Like how the philosophers would try to transmute gold or transmute stones into other stones and other properties and things. So, I mean, if it was just a few isolated spots, yeah, it could be these wizards and sorcerers and alchemists doing this stuff. But no, this is too widespread. It shows up in every culture. So it's like every culture had one of these alchemical wizards doing this stuff. And how connected were they? Was it like a guild? Was it like a specialized group that of traveling salesmen, right? That went around the world
the
and
real Masons, the real Freemasons.
and there is something to that. And but I just don't think it is what people think it is. I think this might anger some people, and maybe some ex-Freemasons might not like what I'm about to say, but I really think for the most part, the Freemasons are just fanboys, and that they are fans of ancient architecture. But I'll tell you what, they can't build like the ancients did. Every single
Nobody can, right?
Masonic, even the most beautiful Masonic temple is veneer stone and plaster work and wooden frames. It's all a facade. Those structures will not last 1,000 years. They will crumble. These are solid stone, ashlar block. Almost no wood. There's
No
nothing but
mortar.
yeah, nothing but the erosionary forces of nature to wear these away. Like they're not going anywhere. You got to blow them up like ISIS does, or time has
Right.
to
Which
erode
is
them.
odd, but like I kind of half think that wars in our modern time are to destroy this shit.
I mean, there's a
They
potential in
do
some of
it.
these. There in some of these wars, there's a potential for these alternative plots and narratives. And I think in the Crusade times, this was very prevalent.
Yeah,
That
they totally did it all in the Crusades.
why do you think they were fighting over these forts? You know, these holy sites.
Well,
Why do you think they thought they were holy?
and I used
And
to think in art history, like we're both art historians. That's something else we have in common. But
yeah,
like they would always tell us that the statues like that wouldn't have their heads or whatever. At first, I remember just thinking it was because the neck's like the weakest point in a statue, and then eventually it would whatever. But
okay,
no, it's like during the Holy Roman Wars. Apparently, they would deface anything that wasn't Christian, and so anything that was predated Greek or Roman or whatever, they took the heads off all the statues. Like I don't
right.
know how much of that is true or not, but like
Well, I mean, just that kind of behavior, right? That
exactly.
kind
But
of
the behavior itself is what we still see today.
exactly, right? So it's like nothing's new under the sun. That kind of behavior nowadays was just as prevalent back then. So, yeah, who do you want to believe? Like, if you're looking at the news today and you don't know who to believe, think about, going to a library and asking somebody, hey, I'd like to learn about Rome. Okay, well, here's a whole bunch of books by a whole bunch of stuffy professors that got paid a lot of money, you know, they all got their message approved by the Guild of Scholars of you know the university of the world or whatever. So it's you got to be skeptical of everybody, and it's hard to not be kind of paranoid or
Yeah.
just completely untrusting of everyone. You got
Yeah,
to
no, I
ground
mean, like, I at this point, I feel like I've been history black pilled.
yeah, you got to ground yourself, right? And it's
Yeah.
like the only thing that really will ground you is these stones, because I mean,
Yeah.
even if all these sites around the world, these advanced sites, are just decorations in a fishbowl, like Dan might have been hinting at in his conversation with you, that maybe some of these are just maybe we're just the ants in the ant farm, and the pet owner decided to give us some really cool decorations in our fish tank.
Right,
You
right.
know, even if
But
that's
even then, like that, it's good to have those to remind you that something's going on, something that
and
we
that's
don't know is going on.
yeah, and then we go back to like the motive of the power people or power beings, and like what they want to do with humanity, and if it is us or if it is an outside group. Because like I was discussing with Dan, and I think we've talked about a little bit too, it's like, okay, if it's an outside entity that is controlling us, it could either be a farm or prison style scenario where we are
Mhm.
cattle, or just ones and zeros for their own uses. Or is it like a Johnny Appleseed scenario where they are trying to cultivate a civilization? They want to engineer a planet, like terraform a whole biosphere, and maybe we are their project, and they are working
Yeah.
on us to build us into something. Or maybe we could have been invaded and they are subverting us with all this, and this is all red herrings, and these temples, not made by humans, made by this power structure, were put here to confuse us about what our real history is.
Well, sometimes I feel like we've been. It's almost like a game we play, like, especially with the amnesia thing.
Yeah,
Like I have like these little like fantasy thoughts about how like okay, what if like I was bored with infinity as an
yeah,
aspect of God or whatever you want to call it, an aspect of energy. And I like we've set these rules on ourselves. Like we're like, okay, let's turn the puzzle pieces upside down, and we don't won't give them the picture of the box, and we want them to
yeah,
put it together.
yeah.
Um,
Give yourself a
just
challenge. Yeah,
challenge. Yeah, it's like this whole thing is some sort of um diversion, distraction, challenge thing. I don't know.
I
I
like
think
that too, right? I mean, that's not outside the realms of possibility. That we could be dealing, like, it's that is just really, that all that is, Nikki, is just an offshoot of the simulation hypothesis, right?
yeah.
It's just another version of a simulation. Think about video
But
games.
the thing is like sometimes I don't like living in the victim world. I don't like thinking that like
Hmm.
I mean, and maybe we are, but at the same time I don't like thinking that like we're insignificant and that we are like being toyed with at the sometimes. So sometimes it's like you have to like take your power back and be like, okay, well maybe I did this to make myself grow somehow.
Yeah, that it. what you find is when you get into this at this level, when you're starting to contemplate the ideas of the the entire history being fabricated by potentially non-human entities, it really is a blow to your sense of sovereignty, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Well, I thought I was in control of my life and my destiny, and you're telling me that everything is engineered and pre-programmed and planned to happen the way it is. And yeah, that's really demoralizing, and it makes you feel like you don't have control of
Oh
your life.
yeah, I've had some dark nights of the soul with that, sitting with that whole thing. But then you actually get over it and you start realizing that it's actually kind of liberating in a lot of ways too, because and really nobody knows what's really going on here.
That's right. And that's the one thing you can kind of take hope in, is that your perspective is just
Just
as
as
valid,
valid as anyone else's.
right? And if you feel helpless, your level of helplessness is just as much as everybody else's, right? So it's like, even if you don't feel like you have any power, well, you're all powerless together. So you can all take comfort in the fact that you're all in the same boat. We're all in this together. And I think that, yeah, if it was some kind of controlling force, it could be a lot more controlling than it is.
True.
I, I, I feel like if it is some kind of a parent or a nanny entity or civilization or being, then it is giving us a lot of leeway. I mean, look at current events. Look at what we're allowed to do, right?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, you hear about all the stories in the Bible and other ancient texts of the gods getting upset with humans and coming
Right.
down to
And
correct
smiting
their
them.
behavior, right? And I haven't seen a lot of smiting lately, so I think
Just
they
self-induced. We have
a
self-induced.
lot of it a lot of it might be self-induced. So it's like, is it more of a Johnny Appleseed scenario where they wanted to cultivate a civilization and they couldn't get too uh, they couldn't get too hands on. They kind of wanted to cultivate from a distance to let it unfold and develop the way it was going to naturally. But in doing so, you run the risk of letting your experiment, get haywire because everyone starts acting however they want and all the parameters get out of control. Well, maybe some of these cataclysms are
Reset.
recalibrations of yeah
Right.
recalibrations of the parameters. Like, all right, this, you're getting a little bit too hedonistic, or you're getting a little bit too decadent, or you know you're getting too stagnant. We kind of want you to
Right.
keep going, and maybe this each cataclysm is a little bit of a kick in the ass, or maybe one of these temples dropping down where you live is going to be a boost to your intelligence. So it's like, I'm conflicted, right? There are some days I'll wake up feeling like, well, I'm in a prison planet, but then other days I feel like we're just kind of like orphan kids in Johnny Appleseed scenario, and we're going to grow up to find out that it was our duty to evolve and become this higher
Yeah.
level of civilization in order to meet the beings who created us and
I think
perhaps get bigger.
the the thing I try to like think about a lot is, or the only thing that really just doesn't sit well with me is I do feel, yeah, we got a lot of freedom, but we also are very manipulated as a whole, and
Yes,
it's
yes.
very strong manipulation. And I feel like so many of the people that I love in my life that aren't online and don't give two craps about anything we're talking about, and would not for even if I gave $1 million wouldn't get this far in this conversation.
Oh, I know.
um
Yeah.
I got a ton of those people in my life. uh
Hmm.
I just kind of, I feel like they're being manipulated, brainwashed, and not being able to be in their own sovereignty at all by design. And I don't know if that's their own battle with whatever's, like the nanny nursery thing, or I don't know what, if that's their own contract with being in this school or what the hell. But
Yeah.
it's just it's I kind of just wish we could be left to figure out our own sovereignties, like our own
Right.
individualities, like because we are being pressurized.
And it
What
makes me
is
wonder that if it is all self-induced, all the human misery, if it is all self-induced, then maybe that means the powerful people figured it out a while ago, that yeah, it is a Johnny Appleseed situation, and that the founders of our civilization are going to let us behave however we decide to behave, and they're like, hey, well, the gods are going to be okay with it. Let's just lie and steal from everybody else. Who
Yeah,
cares?
it's like that game of oh, like there's that game where like the little circle grabs the other circle smaller than in it and it becomes bigger and it like
Yep.
it's like so yeah, you sometimes I think about the fact that there's certain egos that in an ego can be Coca-Cola. It can be like a company. Doesn't have to just, I mean, it's these thought forms too, I mean, like these egregores and these thought forms, like you don't have to just stick to like Bill Gates or something. I mean, like
Sure. Yeah.
these certain egos can come and just like completely governments, like entity, like institutions, they could come and just power over and just swallow up all kinds of other little individual egos. And so we are always having to play with that dynamic, and that's definitely hard to manipulate or hard to navigate through.
Navigate, right? Yeah, it is. It's like I get the feeling sometimes looking at this stuff that there have probably been people a long time ago who are doing what we're doing, and they figured it out a long time ago. And perhaps some of those people are the powerful people today because they took that knowledge that they were able, to put together back then before everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that, if you know about this stuff before anybody else and you've got a little bit of money and power and influence, you can make a lot of subversion happen. You can skew the narrative almost however you want. So it is hard to think about it like I'm a pioneer discoverer of this, because it's like, no, especially like places like Egypt, you've got
Yeah, it's been
records
here for
of
a while, and I mean,
in here for a while.
it's like I didn't hear anything. I mean, like when I was, like I said, in Peru, I noticed the nubs, and then like I was like, what are those? And they're like they're for lifting, and I'm like, no, they're not. Like that's like physics. Like I took physics. Like you can't not like that doesn't work with physics. Like that's not for lifting.
Right, right.
Oh, we don't know where they are then.
Yeah, and that's the narrative falls apart. Like their argument falls apart. It's like, well,
And
it's
then
either this.
for me, stuff like that, like I put that in my box of things that bother me.
Yeah,
And
right.
eventually when I come around and find, other people that have the same box of things that bother them, uh yeah, it's
It's
and
it,
shoot,
it kind of it bothers me because they're not
so cool.
they're satisfied. Like they're satisfied with not knowing, or they're satisfied with the lame excuse they've been told. It's like, but if it's like a house of cards, guys, like if you pull that out, all these other ones are going to fall down too, and you're going to realize the real state of, the house is built on sand, right? So
Yeah.
you, I just don't see how, if you even start investigating this stuff, how you can't just be sucked in all the way. Like I don't see how people can just casually come and go and dip in and be like, oh yeah, well, the pyramids are impossible to be made by humans because of how many blocks and how much time it would have taken and all this and all that. But other than that, I don't really, subscribe to any
Yeah, but
other
that's just one
theory.
anomaly on the planet. Everything else
Right,
is normal. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I
You
know.
you can't cherry pick like that. I mean, you can pick a lot of good examples like we're doing today, and showing them, like highlighting them, but it's not like I'm trying to make big of something that isn't already, pretty big on its own. Like I'm just picking the highlights because we have the best quality photos of these places. But like I've got some regions, right, where it's like you've got a couple photos of something, and no one's been there in years. People probably aren't they're not gonna go back there for a long time. So, like, bringing up the pinch holes, there's a place I want to talk about with the pinch holes, right? So in Jordan now, these pinch holes, they show up around the nubs and the scoop marks and some of these other traces. Well, one place we found them was in Jordan, and it's in the bedrock underneath a like a cliff carving, a machined
Yeah.
cliff of some kind. You can see that there is a like a groove or a patterning
Yep.
to the rock, like
Just
something
like
got
those ones in China too. Um,
right, like
but like a
yeah.
little more worn. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Then you see like
show
pits.
them what the pinch hole is like with your cursor.
Okay,
Little.
so you'll see these. They are a pair of holes, and you'll notice that they connect. They loop around behind like a U, and it makes this little tang of material, this little hook that you can. potentially hook onto with ropes or, chains. We've heard all kinds of ideas, and I still really don't know what we're looking at. I'm still in the beginning stages of, I think this is advanced and related. Beyond that, we can speculate, but I think at the point I'm at now, with all the evidence I found, I can conclusively say it's advanced and connected. So these little pinches, they're weird. Like that, you want to give them some kind of rudimentary, basic explanation. Like
Yeah.
okay, I see niches and I see a row of these, so I am going to picture in my head a rope going across and a curtain maybe to hide these. And on ceremony day, a worship day, you pull back the curtain and everybody worships, and then you close the curtain and everybody goes home or whatever.
Yeah, but
Oh,
that would be such like a waste for such a small thing, right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, that's really
that's
labor
where
intensive,
it's
right?
really labor, and it's very permanent. That's a very permanent thing for
Yeah,
something so
and not
transient.
very robust. Like, look here, we've got ones that are broken,
Yeah.
broken here, over here, completely
Well,
broken.
that's why your pinch hole video, by the way, is brilliant. But that's why the fact that like they would have also been used for lifting is dumb, because it's like that's like okay, by the time you lifted that weight, the whole thing would have busted. Um,
Now, we're gonna go to the one that, like, Ziggy and I, like, we first found. Ziggy found it, showed me, and we were just like blown away. Like, what? Like, no. Like, we kind of maybe saw one or two of these in other places, but then we saw this entire wall of them. So we're going back to Baalbek again, right? Because a Baalbek is one of these sites that's got a lot of hallmarks packed in one. So there's not many nubs here. We found a
Baalbek
couple
is also
nubs.
known as the Temple of Jupiter, and they say that it's built by the Romans.
Right, yeah. Which these blocks, these hallmarks, I'm saying no way.
No,
You know,
no way.
unless the Romans stole whatever this, tech was, and was able to wield it like the masters could. That's the only way I'm going to say it's Romans, if it was stolen tech used by the Romans, because them with manpower, like we were talking about earlier, like, no,
No,
it's not
no.
happening.
That's how
It's
many
like,
cranes it would take to move it.
I mean, just to lift it, like, then to move it, how are you gonna coordinate all these cranes moving? Like, you can't. It's just not. It's not happening. So beyond other, like, there's lots of things here at Baalbek, right? So there are nubs, but they're not in these obvious places. There's a matter of fact, there's a portion of Baalbek called the Temple of Venus, and that temple is off limits to tourists, and I wonder why. So I bet if you go there and start digging around, you're probably gonna find nubs there. But Baalbek, we noticed, had a couple of these, like, pairs of holes again, right? In the columns and some spots around the block work. And then Ziggy found a photo. Let me see if I can pull it up here. I've got so many. It's going to take me a second. It is. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go to the pinch hole folder, because another thing I've done, by the way, guys, is I've got my site catalog with all my site photos, but then I've also got these separate folders where I've tried to classify the hallmarks and group them. So, like with the pinch holes, I've got them by region, and some others I haven't categorized yet. Baalbek's pinch holes. Here we go. Okay, the suspense is over. So look at what's going on here. The same expression, these like pair of holes that loops around.
Oh wow,
But
yeah.
what is it doing in this kind of orientation, this pattern? It's like,
A lot of
it's
them.
not. It's a lot of them. They're not in a straight
Nice.
line. They kind of like
Yep.
up and down. There's different profiles. Some of them are like square. Others look kind of like
Round.
butterflies, like, yeah, rounded. And the most curious part is that they go across the joinery.
And we really don't know if they connect in the back like that.
Some do, some don't, right? You're gonna have to get like a pipe cleaner and take it with you, or like a
Right,
straw,
a string.
and check. But some of them, they do have a shadow, and like you can see the light coming through.
Uh-huh.
So some of them definitely do connect. Others, they just form like a pair of divots where it didn't form all the way, and then that makes you wonder. It's like,
Yeah.
well, okay, well, how did that happen?
Or it's
Did it,
broken over time.
or it's broken? Yes. You see here, this one is pretty good. Shows the corner ones. So at the corner of one block and start of the next block, they've hollowed out the little section there, and you can see the light coming
Yeah,
through.
you can see
So
the
it's
light there.
so it's like, what was the function of these? What were they doing? And then we kind of filed this away. Oh, by the way, here's another really cool mark down here that nobody sees. Is like an imprint with like 4 holes in it. Looks like a clamp of some kind. That's a really cool trace. No one talks about that. But these pinch holes, it was kind of classified off to the side as like a curiosity, a one-off thing that we hadn't seen before, or maybe we'll probably never see again. And then Ziggy, I think, stumbled onto them in Egypt, and then it was like we were off to the races because then we started seeing them everywhere, and I felt like I was haunted
Yeah,
by
I
them. Like
sent you some. I was just looking at whatever, what is it, comb ombo or
Mumbo,
whatever.
yep,
Yeah,
come
today,
Mumbo.
and I sent you some more on Twitter because I was like, oh, I found those two in my photos, and I was like,
I think
those
I
are
saved
actually really
them.
good.
I think I've got them saved in here, either on my phone or here in the catalog proper. But yes, Egypt was like a eureka moment because all of a sudden here we have like not just similar holes, but the exact same. Like
Yeah,
just like at Baalbek, they're going across the joinery of the block again. Like just like the last photo, like at the end of one block and the start of the next, they've started these little holes. And they're all over the place in random places, like artwork. They're over top artwork.
and then I think our eye has been kind of the fact that they're over artwork bothers me because then
It
that
does.
messes the
It's
time up even
destructive.
more. It's
It
just
destroys it destroys the aesthetic, and it makes you wonder, okay, if this was done by the original builders, what kind of attitude did they have that they were, you
well,
know,
then it makes you think maybe it
harsh?
wasn't done by the original.
Yeah, right. And we've
Um,
gotten a lot of comments on Twitter saying the same, that it's like, okay, well, due to its destructive nature and due to the fact that it looks like they didn't care about the original artwork,
it may be
then
really this part might be how like they say with like the Colosseum in Rome, they say that there's all the holes and damage on the Colosseum.
yeah, good
And
one.
like when you're in Rome, the tour guides will tell you, who knows if it's true, but they'll tell you it's because during the Holy Roman Wars or whatever, like they would take out all the iron. There was like iron clamps that connected the Colosseum together, and they would take it out to make cannons or
Yeah.
stuff like that. So maybe there is some sort of metal stuff that we didn't know that was in there, and these are the dig sites and how they got it out. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like metal infrastructure and things like that, I'm open to that. But it's like, I mean, due
But
to
at
the
the same
advanced
time, they
nature,
have some really tiny pinch holes that are
mhm,
interesting, and then the huge pinch holes. Ooh,
yes.
show them the biggest pinch holes. It almost look like a cave.
Oh yeah, I've got those too. But like, first before we move on, I just want to say these, like, now you would think, okay, they're outside on a temple, so they're for hanging a banner or something like that. Well, they're also inside, and I love this photo because there's no context to this. It was just a post on Instagram uh, with no caption, but it's this guy is pointing out one of these pinch holes, and I would love to have been a fly on the wall in that room to hear what he has to say about these pinch holes because
Yeah.
it's inside this temple. And Annie
This would
XD
be where
on his
he hung our coats. I mean,
right, yeah, but Annie XD shows these in his one of his recent videos. And again, inside a temple, in a very ornate, finished temple, you have these kind of crude, damaging marks. So you got to look for where they are. And it's like, okay, where they are might imply function. So here's a screenshot from one of Annie XD's videos, and it's like, okay, I see this kind of like, okay, a blown out pinch and some other like cavitation that looks like pinches around a niche, maybe. So I'm starting to get the feeling that it's some kind of like energetic, like the nubs are. It's something like energetic.
well, that's where my default is. Okay.
Well, I looked on these columns, and I believe this is Luxor. I'm not sure. I, I get some of these temples in Egypt mixed up, but this one has a row of what's left of figures.
No.
And you can even see from here, see the pinches
The
right
leg and
here
the
on the
arm.
hip, on the arm, and on the breast. And it's like, all right, well, this threw me for a loop because why would they put them here in this orientation on these statues? It's like I don't get it. It's if it's a banner or a tapestry or something, it no longer fits because these aren't, in a uniform placement. They don't really seem to fit the idea of hanging pendants or like
Right.
tapestries or banners. It just doesn't really the story doesn't fit. And then you go inside the bent pyramid, and this is from Jimmy at Bright Insight. Actually, I think this photo might be from Wandering Wolf, but Jimmy also photographed this. this is the top step into like the main one of the bigger chambers inside the
I'll
bent
have to look at
pyramid.
my bent pyramid. I don't remember seeing
Yeah,
that.
like the top step has one of these. And it's like, why is it there inside the pyramid? These are in Malta too. We have our friend megalith hunter
Yeah.
in Malta, and she is showing all kinds of these. And we can jump over there because I've got them subcategorized too. And one of my favorites, like we were just looking at in Egypt, it's like a niche with these pinches around it.
Oh yeah,
You
and
need
so those are interesting because
the
they're on the
light
little corner, like.
at the corners. Yeah, like they came in from a diagonal,
Hmm.
and I don't it just these orientations don't fit like these ideas of like, oh, it's a banner, or it's a tapestry, it's a flap of something. I mean, Ziggy found them in the ground and like these huge ones in the walls at Malta, and they're so weird, and they look like
Those look melted in or something,
they
like,
do look like melted, like
or like
energy
clay.
went in.
It looks like if you're how you're scooping out clay almost. It's just.
Yeah, like a scoop, and maybe some of this other stuff is scoop marks, but it's like whatever it was, it energetically went in and kind of like did a U-turn and like
And
shot
then was
back
like,
out.
cool.
So what is that? Is that like polarity? Is there like a
I
magnetism?
mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like one of those things where maybe they could do that thing where like if you vibrate the ground enough, it becomes liquid. It's like
Like the cymatic stuff?
like a
Yeah.
cymatic stuff, and then yeah, but I mean, like even if we figure out how they did it, why did they do it? What was the function of having and leaving these pinch marks like this? Like I
Yeah.
said, half the stuff that they left is not aesthetic, except like I do, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, like except sometimes Malta is one of these that defies what I'm about to say, but it's like what we're seeing, I think we're seeing the bare bones of stuff that would have had other stuff on top of it. So we're
I
kind of
think
seeing like like we're seeing the work, we're looking behind the sheetrock.
yeah, you're seeing the skeleton of the structure.
Yeah.
And you
And we
don't
have to
have
keep
all
that
the
in mind
muscle.
because
Yeah.
I think a lot of times these would have been stuccoed or whatever. They would have had other
Or
functions, and
just like
it
I
would have
think
been
metal
linked to
attachments,
wiring.
metal infrastructure, things like that that would have been stolen or rusted away.
Yep.
But those are the kind of things, yeah, I think about that too. And I think that a lot of these cases where it's like it looks
But even if
advanced,
that were the case, there would be at least one or two examples somewhere of what the facades actually looked like because they would
that's
have been
fair.
protected by something.
You would think. And I think when we look at the clamps, there is an instance where we do have some intact clamps left over, right? So we can at least find some of these bronze and metal and sometimes stone clamps, keystone clamps. And for those who don't know, I'll go ahead and bring that up because we have that as a subfolder too. It is under keystone clamps. And I'm sure you guys have seen these before. So in Egypt, we have certain profiles of them where they connect blocks and like an hourglass shape. Other times we'll have like a bar shape or a capital I shape,
Yeah, or the T shape is really
or the T
popular.
shape, and the illustration of how they think it was done. A mobile furnace forge that just smelted, and some guys with some protective PPE, some medieval PPE, and they're just pouring these clamps in like this, and it's like maybe that's how it was done. I don't know why was it done. I'm really not sure. It doesn't seem like these clamps really were required to keep some of these stones together. Like it,
Don't seem like they made a difference one way or the other, do they?
yeah, they don't seem like they make much of a difference. It seems more like a connectivity thing, like a conducive,
Yep.
conductive nature, like a
Like part of
electricity or
their electric work, yeah.
something, some kind of grid work. And the way they connect things is just really weird. It's like you wanted to anchor it together, like you want. It's like pinning electronics together with like soldering, with solder. You know, you want
Right,
to
right.
you want to make them all the connections, connect. So I see these things, and those are the ideas that jump into my head. Like I said, we have some instances where the metal is still in place, and who's to say if this is the original metal? Sometimes, like this
Oh,
example from Iran is a bar style, but what it's actually in is hourglass. And like you said, imagine during the time of like a famine or warfare, and you have one of these ruins in your territory, but you don't have any metal to fight the invading army. Well, you know that ruin over there has all those metal clamps in it. And man, we sure could use that metal to make some spearheads and some knives and
Yeah.
some daggers.
I
So
mean,
I think there was probably a few, at least in a few areas, instances of invading armies or just like poor people, desperate people, destitute people that were scavenging and salvaging these metal clamps out. So we might have like layers and layers of this happening. We might even have people coming back later revering the site and saying, you know what, we're going to put new clamps in. We want to restore it or
right,
something.
right.
So
That's a good point.
the timeline on these is just like all over the place. It could be done in some cases by the original advanced builders, or it could be an imitation done later on by some people who thought they knew why they were doing it. Like in Greece, for example, you see a lot more fragile, delicate, like you said, the T shape and capital I shaped clamps and bar style clamps. And a lot of that evidence looks like later restorations, almost like modern restorations that uh, antiquarians and archaeologists are using this idea of clamps to restore sites. The Athens Acropolis has a good example of that. There's a more clamp evidence in Cambodia, stone clamps, so not metal.
Hmm.
And perhaps these are pinch holes.
Those look like pinch holes to me.
I mean, and there's more of this around this stonework. What goes around comes around. This stuff is repeating all over the world. We have them. Either this is Peru or Bolivia, either either somewhere in the Sacred Valley, or this is Pumapunku. And you have the I shaped, the capital I or T shaped clamp. It's like, well, we just saw that in Greece. So what's it doing all the way over here in
Yeah,
Peru or
exactly.
Bolivia, right? So,
And then you
you
have
know,
the bow tie. You have the bow tie in Japan and in Iran. Like that's a
yeah.
very
hmm And even here, you can see over here maybe a pair of holes and then a pair of holes. So, like, if you find a picture with a hallmark in it, keep looking around. You might see
you'll find
others
other
around
ones.
it,
Yeah.
and it leads me to believe that these traces are connected through the ability or the technology. It's like if it rings true in this one scenario and it rings true in this other scenario, I got a feeling they're connected. And more in situ, I believe this one's in India, maybe Kashmir region, I think. An interesting bar style clamp. And they're not very deep. They're just like, superficial almost. So
Yeah.
it's another one of these mysteries. And a lot of people online have their thoughts about what these were for and how they were done. And I say, okay, well, first of all, that's two different questions: what they were for and how they were made. And you have to like answer one at a time. You got to say, okay, well, I need to know what they were for, but I need to know how they were made. Well, if you know the level of ability of the person of the civilization that's building it, what their culture was about. What their engineering preferences were. Then you could say, okay, well, then I know why they were made the way they were. But you have multiple cultures doing the same things, and all these different cultures have all these different ideas of what civilization is, and different levels of technological development. So it's a great equalizer. It kind of it stretches across all cultures, high and low. You
Right.
know,
And these are supposed to be cultures that didn't even know how to sail across the oceans yet.
especially the Peruvian and Bolivian stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, and
They weren't connected.
you can't even say that they just heard it from a sailor who heard it from a sailor who heard it from a sailor across the world, because it's executed the exact same way. Like not just in principle, but in technique.
Do we have any in like Australia?
We don't have much in Australia at all. And I wonder if it's just because it was not in a good location, either in terms of climate in the past, or if maybe it was a off limits area, or an area they only used for their own purposes and didn't build any fish tank aquarium decorations
Right.
stuff. So I don't know. We
I mean, they
Charles,
have interesting petroglyphs and stuff there.
yes, and Charles Cost shows that some of the bedrock stuff looks all artificial, like maybe Ayers rock. There's some aspects of that look
Yeah.
artificially manipulated, like sculpted, like what we're looking at today. So I don't know. I mean, when you get really, it's hard to say, hard to say if it's far back or not, right? So if you get to the beginning of the
And
advanced
North
builders,
America too. You know, we have very little up here.
true. And it's like and maybe South America is the beginning of the advanced builders because in that area, what you're seeing is advanced architecture, but it kind of blends into natural morphology of mineralogy. It's almost like they could camouflage their abilities to look like natural erosionary processes. So you have like a cliffside that looks all eroded from water or whatever. But no, it was just their technology that did that, that made it appear to be eroded like by water. So there's a few quarries in Peru. Brian knows a few of these sites where it's a quarry, but it doesn't look like any quarry that you or I or anyone else is familiar with. The marks, the cuts, it looks like they plucked out stones. It looks like they somehow vacuumed up stone and like did weird crazy
Oh,
things.
interesting. Okay.
So, and I can pull up some of those if you like. This kind of quarry work is not indicative of anything that
Oh,
humans do,
yeah, yeah. I always call those like the spaceship rocks. Like I'm like, I don't
right? Huge pieces of stone that just have odd little either recesses into them or bits of block plucked
Yeah,
out of
you
them.
have those in Japan. You have those in
Mhm.
that place that we talked about, Bonzino or whatever in Italy.
Bamarzo, right, in Italy, yes. And
Marzo. Yeah, I mean, like
Sri
this
Lanka,
weird, like,
weird bedrock stuff, just manipulating the bedrock and taking chunks
well, I
out.
like
And
Justin's idea is that this was like where they would practice.
could be, right? Because if you have something that's very powerful, like a technology, and you're going to build something as like permanent and
That's Sexy
lasting,
Woman.
yeah, like if you like, or like Tamil Nadu with that temple that's like perfect and ornate, you're not just going to like turn on your laser gun and point it right at the building and go, okay, let's go, and before checking the settings. Because if you screw it up, you screw it up, right? So, yeah, some of these really wacky bedrock anomalies, they could very well be where they were testing out their either their technology or maybe testing their technology against different types of rock, right? Maybe they were experimenting. So it has a nub as well, right? And different things.
Yeah, that's
And
funny.
I mean, there's lots of these types of stones all around Peru. Like there's the Saihuite stones, these kind of like lazy stones or just stones that are worked but sitting out in the field. Like, what are they for? What are they doing?
Yeah.
Weird cuts in them, right? So it's like, is it quarry evidence? Is this the finished artifact? Like if we're going to talk about Vimanas and ancient Indian mythology,
Oh, yeah.
are these transportation devices? Is this a stone flying car? Like is this a bench
Right.
that you float
Or is
flew through the
that where
air?
you park the stone, the
Yeah,
park the ship, like I don't know.
with the
Or
bedrock
charge it
nubs.
up.
Yeah, with the bedrock nubs you see at places like Machu Picchu and Pisac. Let's find Pisac because Pisac most people don't really know this about Pisac, but at the center of Pisac is like a little room chamber
Hmm.
structure that is enshrining this piece of bedrock. It wraps around it, it venerates this piece of bedrock, and the bedrock has a nub on it, and it does look
Yeah.
like a power station. Like I
It's
see
almost,
like lightning hitting it or something, right?
and that's like what Mecca is, right? Like is some giant like meteor
Right,
rock that we never get to see. So maybe there's some more properties to the actual bedrock stuff that we know.
and that goes back again to your maybe your the levels of quartz in the stone, and
Mm.
that there's maybe a piezoelectric uh, scenario going on of some kind. So yeah, I think
Or
Earth.
some kind of energy thing that we don't even know about, right? Like we didn't even re-figure out, we didn't even rediscover electricity till like the 18, like whatever, the 17, mid
Sure, and we
1700s.
still don't fully understand how to work with it and
No.
and manipulate it. So there could be undiscovered attributes and properties to
Well, what we
electricity.
really don't understand is magnetism,
Sure, right, and magnetism in combination with electricity, right?
right? Electromagnetism.
So you've got forces we don't understand, and then you've got this kind of ancient architecture we don't understand. And I think the two should be married together. I think the forces we don't understand made these sites that we don't understand. And that's the
Yep.
reason why. That's the reason why they look so
There's
alien
your
is
cover
because,
art.
and I love this because here we have two in one, right? You've got bevel blocks, very faint bevels on these blocks. You can see them though, the little
Oh
edges.
yeah.
And it's almost like they like change their mind, like, oh, the blocks are getting beveled. We can't do that. We're not in the area where we're supposed to show the bevel blocks. We've got to go back to smooth. And they kind of fixed it, they corrected it, and it smoothed it back out. And then what is this doorway? What's going on with the bottom of this
Yep.
doorway? I mean, what? Like if it was supposed to be smooth across the top, what's all this stuff below?
Well,
Conduit?
like Mexico has a lot. Even like when I went to the Gila cliff dwellings, they have entrances into the doors, or like they're small like that, and
Yes.
then they tee out. That's a very big thing in the Pueblo
The,
culture, and
the trapezoidal
that's
motif or the trapezoidal form is global. It's in Egypt. It's everywhere. And people will try to cop out and say, "Oh, well, that's because it's the most practical for preventing damage from earthquakes, right? For resisting earthquakes."
what?
And it's like, okay, well, maybe it is the best design for resisting earthquakes, but how the hell did they come up with the best design for resisting earthquakes? It's like,
Yeah,
again, I want to see the development process where here was their first structure where they tried to incorporate elements of being resistant to earthquakes, and it failed. It fell down. And then here's their second attempt where they changed their design, and it was a little bit more.
or even if it's as simple as they started with these smaller blocks, and then they got where they got really good, and then they got these big blocks. But that's not how it goes.
It doesn't go that way,
They're
does it?
telling us they started with these big blocks, and then as time went on, they started building with bricks.
Yes, and
So
that's like
that doesn't make
it's
sense.
it. Well, it makes you feel like you're running in circles, like you're going backwards. Um, let's see, where was I? Let's go back to. I had another one I was going to bring up in relation to that comment. This one. So yeah, big on the bottom, small on the top. Like yeah, that's
Right.
opposite of what you think, right? And it looks like either the original guys ran out of power as they got to the top, or
They
somewhere along the
rebuilt it.
line, yeah, the work stopped or it got knocked down, and then somebody rebuilt it, assuming they knew what
Those
the
are
original.
interesting nubs on like look how big the nub is compared to the stone.
Yes, and here's something we have to bring out. We have to give all aspects of these mysteries. So if you want to try to explain away some of this stuff as a if there, as though there is a practical fundamental reason for them to have some of these things,
Mm-hmm.
those kind of nubs are a good example to use. So you have this style of attaching roofs where you have these
Oh,
protruding stones,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
And you would lash down, like you basically build the roof as a panel, and then you hang the panel on the
Right. And
angled
just act like
walls.
the logs or yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, by the little pegs. And yeah, it works, right? Yeah, that is how this goes. But when we go back and look at the piece we're looking at before, it's just like I'm not sure if that was what these were for. And if so, like it makes you wonder, right? Okay, why would a culture or a civilization that can play with stone like it's putty, why would they resort to such a primitive way to thatch down a roof or to latch down a roof, right? It's like,
Yeah.
if, why not just make a stone roof? Why if you can
Right.
melt
If you
and
can
mold
do that,
stone,
like if you can make
yeah,
a snake and a puma fist and like some polygonal thing the
right.
size of yeah, might
So why are you resorting to such a primitive way to make a roof attachment? So I'm not sure about that. I think maybe like with some of these nubs, there may be multiple purposes. This might have been a functional pair. Maybe a string or something was strung across for something, or they hung things by them, or maybe it was to attach the roof. But it just doesn't make sense to me that they would use such a primitive technique to attach a roof to something that's obviously so much more advanced. Like I just I think that we're seeing a reinterpretation by the Inca, and then they came up with their idea for how to attach roofs based on what they saw in the megalithic work. And they're like, well, we tried it and it worked, so that's going to be our way of doing it from now on. It's just it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, the mainstream isn't always wrong, and or at
that's where
least
they
the
keep the
mainstream.
llamas. right now.
It's you want to discredit everything the mainstream says, but then you see stuff like this, you're like, okay, well, hold on, there might be a thread of truth to the mainstream perspective. So yeah, it only helps
Well,
you to
sometimes
know.
the mainstream isn't trying to screw you over.
Right,
Sometimes it's
right,
just like what people like really actually think with their own eyes that they're looking at. So yeah.
sure. So you gotta have a well-rounded view of this stuff. You have to know the mainstream, you have to know the alternative, and then you got to find the truth somewhere in the middle. Like Max Egan had a video about that recently where he's like, there's the mainstream narrative of the truth, the alternative
Oh, I
narrative of the
liked that one. I watched that one. And then
and
there's the
there's one in the
yeah.
middle. And you really have to kind of have that mindset. It's like I can't go both feet in, all in on one theory because I'm seeing too many possibilities for multiple theories to be correct.
Yeah.
So it's just like some people want to run to the finish line when they find one piece of evidence, and I'm like, well, hold on, let's get the whole jigsaw puzzle together here first before we start saying what we think the jigsaw puzzle is. So I know there is validity to the idea of advanced ancient architecture. The circumstances around it is up in the air for all of us to argue about, but I cannot deny what my eyes see, and my eyes see like advanced megalithic stonework, manipulating of stone for weird reasons, and it's gone. No one does this anymore. So our mindset has changed, or those people were not us. Simple as that.
I love it, Andrew. That's
Yep.
that's awesome. Okay, so like let's end it there because like that is a lot for people and this was an amazing video. Even for me, I'm already excited about getting to rewatch it because you're such a wealth of knowledge. It's amazing.
You can't just
So
look at them
is
once, right? You have to spend a lot of time with these photos. So don't think after looking at a couple photos you know a site, because a new photo from a tourist could show
oh
up
yeah.
tomorrow from a
I've been
corner that
half
no one
these sites that you're showing right now, I've been to, and I'm going like, I didn't see that.
no one usually does, because no one takes the time. They go through the first page of Google results, right?
I've
No,
been to
go
Pisac.
to page 10, go to Pinterest, go to someone's private gallery, try to find, any tourist photos, anything you can find, old articles by, news sources doing exposés on the sites. Any source, take any photo because it's all valid. As long as it's documenting the real thing and it's not photoshopped in any way,
Right.
then you can use it as evidence. It's documentation of the site. And yeah, you think some of these places, some of these areas, like especially here in Machu Picchu, a lot of this stuff is off limits to tourists.
Yeah.
You're
That's
led
all
down a little primrose path. You can't go back here like on this, but like this left corner. I want to see what's up with these holes down here. No, sorry, some lady with a whistle is going to blow her whistle at you if you try to go over there. And it's like in Egypt, it's even worse. Some guy with an AK-47 or an MP5 is going to
yeah,
come up to you.
exactly.
So you don't have access to the sites like you think you do. And it's not just because people are worried about, you know, rowdy tourists. It's not just to keep rowdy tourists from damaging the sites. It's also because there is some damning stuff at these sites, evidence-wise, that it would probably be better if you didn't see and that archaeologists don't want to talk about.
Yeah. Okay, so is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you wanted to kind of talk about?
Well, that was kind of a great, spread of just what it looks like in terms of like advanced stonework. Like, what if someone was to ask me what I think advanced ancient stonework looks like? I think the photos we looked at today is a pretty good start. You can go from those sites and say, all right, well, I know what he was trying to point out at those sites. Now try to go look at all your favorite ancient sites around the world. If you're a pyramids guy, look for nubs of the pyramids. They're there. Look look for pinches there. Like if you're a Peruvian guy, look for them there. It's like become your own Rolodex of information. I've only been able to get to where I am today by doing the grunt work of saving photos, buying hard drives. I've got 3 laptops sitting next to me full of photos because I need the space. Like I can't guarantee that these photos will be here forever. Some of our photos we've lost. We've gone back to try to find them, and the person who uploaded them decided to take them down.
Mm.
So maybe we had this great photo from a tourist, and that tourist decided, you know what, I look kind of fat in that photo, and I don't really want it to be on the internet. They took the photo down, and we've lost that piece of evidence forever. So it's like you don't realize this is like a gold rush. This is like a golden era of information. And we got to take it because we don't know if it's going to last forever. Everybody needs to become their own authority. Have your own database. You know, you can rely on Graham Hancock's books. You can rely on Randall Carlson's lectures, but you need your own database that you can resort to in an argument or debate. You know, no one wants to hear what you think about someone else's ideas. No one wants to hear you argue someone else's points and fight for somebody else. We want to hear you fight for yourself and stand up for yourself. And if you have to appeal to an authority figure, you've lost the argument. You know, there's the rules of engagement and debate, the logical fallacies, the ad hominems, the red herrings. You know, you can't have any of these logical fallacies. It's just you're in a sparring match and you're going to lose points if you start bringing up those ad hominems and those, you know, logical fallacies. So just try to be honest and try to be true to what your eyes are trying to tell you, and don't think that you have the complete view of a site, because even I don't. We're getting more photos every day, better resolution every day. Landslides happen, excavations happen, discoveries happen, cave-ins happen, all kinds of scenarios. Like a new highway will get built and they'll excavate the highway and find a whole city. You know, stuff like that happens every day. So it's not over. It's like it's not finished. The research work is not done. We're still in that process. So people who want to say the research has been done, it's been proven, it's not advanced, or it's not Atlantis, or it's not aliens, or whatever, we're still in the research stage.
Yeah, beginning.
So don't get ahead of yourselves. It's still, there's still so much groundwork to be laid before we get to those heady concepts of who is responsible and why they're doing it. You know, we got so much more to deal with down here first.
I love it, Andrew. Okay, this has been such a pleasure. So yeah, we'll have to have you on again soon, and thank you so much.
I look forward to it anytime. And if you want to do a panel discussion with some of the other colleagues, get a more roundtable, you know, don't just hear my idea, get the other guys' thoughts. You know, it's good to have these brainstorming sessions, and you'll get better at debating. Don't get flustered and get mad because you lost a debate. You know, it's a learning experience. You're going to come back stronger the next time. You know, don't take things personal. Don't get, you know, bent out of shape when someone says your idea isn't very good. You know, if it's not very good, go back to the drawing board, try again. You know, we're polite enough in our community that we will continue to give you constructive criticism. If you keep coming back, we'll keep trying to give you constructive criticism and help you. We're not authority figures. We're not gatekeepers. We're not trying to, you know, go down in the history books or be
figure it out ourselves.
We need everybody. We can't do it. It's too much for one mind. You need more than one person. You need more perspectives. You need a global perspective. You need the Peruvians to tell us, and the Indians to tell us, and the Chinese to tell us, and the Japanese to tell us. You know, everyone around the world has to give us their input because we haven't lived there. We don't know their culture. They've lived there. They've lived around these ruins generations after generations. I haven't. I don't have the luxury of having these around me to grow up around. So their input is going to be very valuable, and it's as going forward, we're going to lose that. It's like the wisdom keepers. We're losing that as time goes on. So take advantage of what we have available now and try to preserve it, like we're doing with this catalog.
Awesome. Okay. Bye, Andrew.
See you later. See you next time.